Let's get started. Welcome everyone to the County Planning Board meeting for August 15th, 2019. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Got a big agenda tonight. I just want to make the announcement if anybody's here for Centerpoint, they are off the agenda. And also to be adjourned are Haifa, Raymond Avenue School, the Camelot Village, and Fox Run applications will be adjourned tonight. All right, first up on the agenda is Verizon Wireless at New Hamburg Fire District. It's a seeker review of coastal consistency determination and site plan hearing for a proposal to install and operate a small cell facility. And let's see, zoned R20 residential on Channingville Road. It's an unlisted action. New Hamburg Fire District is the owner. Welcome back. And
thank you.
Briefly describe what you've done since the last meeting.
Since the last meeting, we've been working with planning staff to respond to comments that we've received from the various town departments who reviewed the application. We actually were able to meet with planning staff twice since our last appearance, which was very helpful and helped us talk through some of the remaining issues and I think questions that the board had with regard to the application. One of the main questions or issues that we were able to work through was the questions that we got during our last appearance. Were there any other alternative sites available on the fire department or fire district parcel? And so we followed up with the fire district, and the town followed up independently with the fire district, and we did receive written confirmation from them that there were no other available sites on their parcel that they were willing to allow us to locate a facility. Some of the specific areas that the planning board had inquired about, one of the areas I think actually ended up being the leach field for their existing septic, and then another area they actually use and devote to training activities. So we did receive confirmation that there were no other available alternatives on that parcel. And that coupled with the needs analysis that we presented to the planning board, which we were able to go over with some of the board members at this meeting and supplement in our latest submission to the planning board, we've demonstrated that there is a need for the facility at this location. We are limited to the site that we've proposed in the application to actually locate the facility on that parcel, and so we believe we've resolved that outstanding question.
Okay, thank you. Go to Eric.
Yes, staff feels like if the board is comfortable with that analysis, that the issue may be resolved, sufficient for a negative environmental determination, which you have in your packet for your consideration, and also for a conditioned approval. There is, I guess, the questions we think the board should address tonight are relatively minor. One is the applicant proposed an alternative design, which is 5 feet shorter with 2 foot longer antennas, or as proposed, and the planning board should discuss that with the applicant if they're interested. Secondly, the fenced enclosure of equipment in the area, whether or not you want any landscape screening there or not, and yet so what you'd like that to be. And we also noticed that there is no indication of, we don't think there's any lighting with the proposal, but it's not clearly indicated on the plan. We just want to make sure any lighting is pointed, even if it's for emergency purposes, is pointed away from the roadway.
For sure.
And we can confirm that there is no lighting planned for the facility.
Okay, great. That was one of my questions as well. All right, thanks, Eric. Any engineering? Probably not. This. All right, let's go around the board for comments on it tonight. Start with Peters.
Just for the record, the neighbors were notified?
Oh, yep, actually, that's true. I should go with the hearing first. I move that we open the public hearing for this application.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. How many do we get there? 6-0. Anyone in the audience wish to comment on this application? Seeing none, I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. All right, now, continue with your,
Only question, I know the question of landscaping had come up, but as I'm looking at the plan here, you have a 10-foot square area. If you put the landscaping outside, would you need permission from the lessor?
the fire department.
And if you put it inside, how is it going to leave you sufficient room, depending on the type of plant that you use, to really functionally service the equipment? So
Okay.
sort of a Gordian knot there.
And I'll just, we had received the comments and the question of, I saw it was up for a discussion item, whether landscaping would be appropriate for this site. That is true that, we are limited to our kind of leasehold, which is the area that we have designated for the equipment within the fenced enclosure. I don't
Okay.
think that we currently have authorization to install any landscaping on the outside of that enclosed area. And the recommendations for staff talked about some low-profile plantings, I think less than 3 feet in height. And I just, if the idea would be that the plantings would, provide some kind of buffering or are needed to mitigate some kind of visual impact, the 3-foot plantings,
I think there was visual for the, how high is the fence? Is that a 6-foot chain link? Or is it?
I believe it's 6 feet.
So I think that was the intent, was some visual screening from the fence.
Is the chain link fence, is that because for security purposes, or?
It's my understanding that it's standard that we enclose the equipment in a chain link fence for safety purposes, and I think it may also be a
Well, it
requirement.
designates the lease area too.
Yeah, I think it's required by the terms of our lease and also something that we do, standard
I'm
practice.
just wondering is there some other type of fencing material that you could use instead of landscaping? If you could use a wooden fence or something similar
You probably put
instead of the
screening.
chain link?
That's true. I think we could probably put screening in
Or
the
slats.
chain link fence, the
Yeah,
slats.
slots, yeah.
Something to make it look a little nicer, I guess is the point.
They do that a lot.
All right, we'll look into that. Is that it?
I'm good.
Ben?
Yeah, I notice you have 8-foot burial depth for the pole, right? See here. Is there any other support, or is it just 8 feet into the ground with dirt around?
Yeah, this is basically a telephone pole, so it goes in the ground same as a standard telephone pole does. So it's just buried right in the dirt. They come out there with an auger, drill the hole, plant the pole, same as, and that's one of the benefits of the small cell design, is you're not getting into a large foundation, or you're doing a 40-foot caisson or something like that. So this is just, minimal disturbance.
That's sufficient.
Yes,
Okay,
yep, this is,
that's it.
Yeah, so it doesn't need any guy wires?
no guy wires.
Okay. Before I move on, did either of you have any comments on the height, the 45 versus the 50 foot?
What's the delta? I mean, you're lowering it 45, increasing the height by 2, so we're gaining.
Yeah. Well, a little bit bigger antenna is all. So it's, right,
So we have a little bit higher performance antennas available. And so what we had considered doing was offering up an option. So instead of the 49-foot center line, which would put us at a 50-foot overall height, we reduce that overall height by 10%. They put your tip of your antennas at 45 with a center line of our antennas at 43. So really the overall height is 10% less. So that would be substantial in my opinion.
Of course.
And we did provide additional visual simulations
Yeah.
with our last submission, and it shows the difference of how the two alternatives would
yeah,
appear.
they were in the back of the packet there. That,
Of course, those antennas make up for that difference.
Sure.
They are a little bit larger. There's pros and cons.
yeah, just want to try to get a feel for the board as we go through this. You any preference on that?
Nope.
Let's move on to Joan.
With respect to the difference in the antenna height, does that have any impact on the functionality of the tower itself?
It does have an impact, and that's why we have to adjust what type of antennas that we use. And so by adjusting to these higher performance antennas, it allows us to maintain the same coverage and performance for the site as far as the impact of the community is concerned. So we don't lose anything there.
Okay, thank
But
you.
we're able to reduce the height, just a little bit bigger antennas to make that happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right, Rocco?
Going from a 2-foot to a 4-foot antenna, is there any difference in the ambient noise, or is there no noise associated with these antennas?
No noise.
No noise?
No noise.
All right, thank you.
So no hum or anything, that was one of
No.
my questions as well. That's the, Nicole?
I guess I must have missed it last time, but I was looking through the paperwork this time and I saw something about an area variance. What was that for?
The area variance is for the overall height of the pole.
Okay.
I think in this district, you're limited to a maximum height of 35 feet, I believe, so we
Okay.
just need the variance to get us to the.
All right, because I was
even-
wondering what that was. All right.
And we
thank you.
have submitted an application to the ZBA, but they have adjourned consideration of that until the planning board completes the seeker process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I guess that, the lower height would be less of a variance that you would need as well. Just looking at visual simulations, I guess the lower height is my preference, because it just looks like it doesn't stick out as much in the simulations.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Everybody else,
Yeah,
Yeah, 45. is my
45
vote.
versus the 50.
all right? So looks like we have somewhat of a consensus to go with the 45. Any other comments? I think we're ready to go ahead with it.
I move that the planning board hereby determine that the Verizon Wireless at Newburgh Fire District's site plan would not have a significant adverse effect on the environment, and that no environmental impact statement will be required for the reasons set forth in seeker negative declaration for an unlisted action dated August 15, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call the question. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the planning board determine that the Verizon Wireless at Newburgh Hamburg Fire District site plan is consistent with the town of Poughkeepsie's approved local waterfront revitalization program.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the planning board grant conditional site plan approval for the Verizon Wireless at New Hamburg Fire District site plan subject to the following. Respond to the comments of the planning board and those received from town departments and agencies. Said responses to be reviewed by the planning department as to adequacy and completeness, including but not limited to the following, 1 through 4.
And I was going to say 5, that we've chosen the 45-foot height.
And 5, that we've chosen the 45-foot height.
What about the buffering?
I was going to do that with
Can we do that under
architectural.
architectural? Okay, yeah.
Second.
Moved and seconded to grant conditional. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. At this time, we would like to just discuss architectural review. And you've given us these images here of what it would look like. So I think the only thing I'd like to comment from an architectural standpoint is the slats in the fence, or some kind of fence to make it blend in a little bit better.
And I think
So-
that's something that we can do.
Okay, maybe we can discuss that with the department as a condition of architectural approval. Anything else?
Yeah. If you go to a different material fence, does that pose any type of a security issue? It shouldn't. I mean, if you're putting slats in, it shouldn't matter.
What reasons that they use the steel as opposed to wood? Because wood decays over time, and the environmental and other conditions.
So Andrea, who's our site acquisition point person, essentially Verizon intentionally goes with the chain link fence, I guess because it's
It's security and weather.
performs better last longer considering different weather conditions.
Okay.
So that is the standard that they go with. That is what was proposed in our lease agreement with the district. But we will be able to install those slats to make the appearance,
Yeah,
improve
my
the
concern with
appearance.
the slats
Awesome.
is that over time, they get pretty ratty.
Which we can,
Said screening material, and they would replace that if it were to,
it's like a vinyl or.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
like a vinyl screening material that's
Vers-
typically like a
versus
green
the slats.
fluorescent
Yeah, can
color.
you,
Right.
can that be memorialized? Do we usually memorialize that somehow?
We can, yeah.
The green vinyl slats, you mean, or the, or the,
In fact, if
material.
they start to get ratty and what that means, because a lot of times they crack, they don't, because the sun beats down on them, they curl.
That they be replaced if they deteriorate or
Right.
need
Right.
repair.
if they
But who determines
visibly,
that? Really, it's always a case of who determines.
if they visibly deteriorate.
Right.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
all right, yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Does anybody have any comments on color of the screening or slats? Just wanna-
Does the fire department have anything to say about that with the slats, or do they want it open?
We can ask them
Can ask that as part of the
what color they prefer,
review.
and we can look at the proposed colors. I mean, I probably something
I'll leave
that's
that up to you.
Earthy.
more of a brown or
That's what I was-
earthy
that's what I
would
was
be
saying.
I've seen it
preferred,
in like
right?
a green, like an evergreen.
Possibly, yeah. So if you can give us some alternatives, we can check with the fire department, make sure they're comfortable with it, and then we'll sign off
We're trying to
on it.
match the color of the pole or the color of the grass with something like that.
Something like that.
Or maybe even the black top, like black, that would be good. Anyway, yeah, I'll let, those guys can figure that out.
Okay. Have you work with the department on that and the choice of the screening. Any other architectural comments? I move that we grant architecture as presented with the condition that they work with the department on the screening color.
Second.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. You're finished and
Beautiful.
good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Very much.
Great to bring it up Christmas.
Not for the holidays. I almost wanted to, I mean,
Good night.
Good night.
one's more the better.
Just remember to the ZBA meeting in September, I'm not sure, you call the office to make sure that we can get you on the agenda,
Okay.
all right, as soon as possible. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Dutchess Dodge inventory parking for a public hearing, lot line revision review, a special use permit review, and a site plan review for the realignment of a portion of the adjoining parcel for vehicle storage at Names Way and South Road. Let's see, Zone Business Highway. It's an unlisted action. Welcome.
Good evening.
Welcome back. We've done some additional things with the screening, I guess.
Yep, we, following the last meeting, we went back and addressed the comments that we received from the departments, which were a lot of it were smaller details associated with the stormwater management area, the handicapped area, showing utilities on the existing houses, and things of that nature. So we did submit a response to those comments. We did appear before the town board last week, and we did get the zone change. So now that
Right.
the entire area, as shown, that would become part of the Dutchess Dodge dealership is all now highway business.
And everything outside that area is still.
It's still residential. It remained R20, correct.
All right. Thanks. Kristen?
Okay, probably the most notable thing here is on August 7th, as Bill mentioned, the town board did approve the proposed zoning district change. The planning board has already issued a neg deck, and so the application is before you this evening for a public hearing, lot line review, special use permit review, and site plan review. And those resolutions are drafted for your consideration this evening. And I would like to just point out for the applicant's benefit that the lot line revision approval is good until, if it is approved this evening, until October 14th. That does oftentimes get lost in the mix. I know we're not necessarily there yet. They still have to talk about the application, but between staff, a couple of outstanding comments were related to a sidewalk perhaps along the frontage of the property along Route 9, a new or revised circulation plan for access to the site. I was talking to engineering and we were just trying to figure out how a fire truck could actually get into the site from the way that it's laid out right now. So we were just asking, not necessarily showstoppers, but what could be worked out with staff for another review.
I know it's pretty tight with cars out in the, if you try to circulate through the front,
Well-
even with my little car, so hopefully this offloads some of that.
Right. The main reason for doing all this is to eliminate a lot of that congestion. Because right now it's basically bursting at the seams, and there's no place to park anything. So we most certainly could show all the turning movements, and we could work with the planning department.
Yeah, and it
with
was,
that.
it was unintentional. It's just that the circulation plan that was provided, we were also focused on the back portion of the lot that we missed. How are they actually getting in right now from the front?
Right.
We know that some of that parking might shift, as the parking in the back becomes available.
Okay.
So that's it.
And do you have any comments at this time on the sidewalk? I know the adjoining parcel is going to be, DOT is requiring to put a sidewalk in even.
Right. It's something, I spoke with the applicant, it's something that most definitely can be entertained. We did look at that, and the frontage on Route 9, there's 2 telephone poles, there's a fire hydrant, there's once you get about 5 or 6 feet away from the edge of Route 9,
Right.
there's a steep grade, and that's where all the landscaping is. So what we looked at, which would be similar to the Hardee's building to the south,
Yep.
where the sidewalk comes off the corner of the parcel and then heads on an angle to the sidewalk system on Hardee's.
Yep.
And that's somewhat similar to what I saw at Texas Roadhouse. The sidewalk is on the frontage, but it goes up towards the parking lot there, and then Golden Corral, same thing.
Yeah, that was
So,
another tough issue because of the hill, the handicapped access.
right, so what we were thinking is, we can connect or attach the sidewalks on the southern corner and the northern corner. And then one of the thoughts was to provide some striping to show a walk aisle that would connect up with the sidewalks that go in front of their buildings. So anybody, walking along Route 9 on the sidewalk system would then be directed to the sidewalks in front of Dutchess Dodge and then back out.
Yeah, right now, the one to your south,
Right,
the Hardee's there just stops.
right. But if a sidewalk were to be placed along Route 9, it would have a lot of jogs in it to go around existing telephone poles. Again, a fire hydrant, there's light poles that we would have to deal with as well.
There's a few
this-
obstacles there.
There's a lot of obstacles.
I think even one of your entry signs is in the
Right.
way.
And so we might have to, with something like that, there's a potential where we'd have to eliminate some landscaping because the only place to put it
Yeah.
would then be right on Route 9 and, it probably wouldn't survive there with the salting and everything going on. So that would be the preference, would be to connect to the system in the corners and then direct everybody to the sidewalks.
All right?
Just for that discussion, recent experience in the last 2 to 3 years with the DOT is that Texas Roadhouse and Golden Corral were probably the last projects with sidewalk where that off-highway alignment was permitted in part, and DOT has gotten insistent as a condition of any highway work permit that sidewalks be located entirely within the right-of-way, and they are not flexible about they're not flexible about allowing for detours onto private property. So any conditions of approval related to a sidewalk should allow for that circumstance.
Okay. If that, I mean, I don't think you're applying for a DOT or permit at the moment though, right?
The intention was not to,
So I'm just wondering if
with
they
this
even,
particular
if they
plan.
even need to, if it comes in to the site. that-
Yeah, and typically that's something we would recommend as staff to, that discussion would happen sooner than later so that any requirements or any of those elements are folded into the site plan review and the site development that they're working with currently. For this particular application, their proposed changes are significantly, if not all, at the back of the property. It might almost be recommended from staff that you refrain from conditioning an approval on that, but perhaps that's an ongoing discussion. It's really up to the board.
I mean, it's kind of a missing piece of sidewalk in the whole length there from IBM Road down to the deli, so
You're right, but he is right, there's a fire hydrant and.
there's some obstacles.
Yeah, there's some obstacles, so I don't even know how they would do that. Would they have to remove that fire hydrant and move it somewhere else? And
You'd have to
I don't know
go
how that
around it.
works. Go around it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's,
I would think that the DOT would have some type of provision for those type of problems.
well, let's move on, we can discuss and get everybody's comments.
So they can't do anything until they put in the sidewalk.
They have provisions, but they're not cheap.
Right.
Any engineering comments, Tom?
I think Kristen hit most of them.
Okay, great. This is a public, so I move that we open a public hearing for this project.
Second?
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Is there anyone in the audience wish to comment on the Dutchess Dodge application? Yep. Come on down.
Captain George Finn from the Arlington Fire District. I'm the fire prevention officer. I know some things have been addressed as far as the apparatus movement plan, but in my letter dated July 30th, I brought up the existing structures that are in the back, parcels 048975 and 065967. They are posted, condemned, and unsafe to enter, and I was concerned about their being there as part of the site plan approval. Is it possible to address those structures, and can they be removed or demolished prior to this site plan being approved and as part of a condition?
Okay. Thanks, George.
Thank you.
I mean, I can speak to that. I know the intention, right now they're inhabitable and they're condemned, but the applicant does want the opportunity to come into the town with a building permit. He knows there would be significant renovations or improvements that would be required. But we feel that some of the structures can be salvaged, as long as they're brought up to code. And they are on the residential lots, and they are existing.
And that was a discussion you had with the town board too, right? You presented it the same?
Right, we propose to keep the structures intact, and then that we know the applicant knows that he would have to come in with a building permit application if he does choose to either knock it down and replace them or do major renovations to the structures.
Are you aware of any timeline for that? Because they'll only continue to deteriorate.
Right, well, with him purchasing the property, he's in the process now of, figuring out what he wants to do with those structures. But he did tell me when we sat down and prepared this application that he does want to get residential, single-family residential homes back in use on the two lots. But again, he's still evaluating whether it's worth knocking them down versus doing a major renovation.
All right. Is there anyone else wish to comment on this application? Seeing none, I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Let's go around the board for comments, and please chime in if you have any comments on the sidewalk and/or structures as well. Start with Joan this time.
I guess I don't have really any input on the sidewalks. If it's overly burdensome, then I, wouldn't be in favor of imposing the sidewalk. Just in the notes, it says that you're going to have to extend the water line for parcels in the back. Is that going to be an issue at all for the development?
Well, we, in responding, our position was we wanted to keep the existing water service the way it is, but, reading through the last comments, the water department's insisting on the house that's going to be converted to the office and the detail be connected to the service that feeds the dealership now, so, we're going to have to follow suit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rocco?
Yeah, a couple of things. Here. As far as the access into the back, is that through the current
Yes,
place in the front that's already paved and stuff, so you use the existing entrance?
correct.
Because isn't there a right-of-way or a road that goes to the side there?
Yeah, there's a road or a driveway to the north that's going to feed the two houses we just spoke about, as well as Mrs. Casortis, who lives back there. So there'll be 3 residents using the existing driveway, but this proposed storage area will be connected to the back of the dealership and will be
Okay.
independent of that driveway.
And there'll be no work done on that roadway?
No.
Okay. Just to get back to the houses that are condemned, is there, I know that George from Arlington Fire brought up, I think it was that was a safety issue? Is that the thing, safety? So if nothing, if we approve of the site and you decide to do nothing, what does that mean from with an ongoing safety thing? I guess
Well,
that's my
yeah.
question.
Right.
And I think maybe that's why it was brought up the way it was.
I don't know that there's anything that would compel them to take it down right currently. I mean, they're uninhabitable, right? But they're
Right, and they're posted as such.
and they're posted as such.
My question would still be, would there pose any safety to the workers or to anyone moving those cars back there at the parking lot?
No, they're completely independent. They would be behind the parking lot is the driveway, so you'd have to go across the driveway into the area where the house is. So these houses will not come into play at all with operation of the dealership and the new storage area.
Yep, all the work is staying within the roadway, if that makes sense. So anything north, west, or south of that driveway that's existing is not.
Well, I'm just kind of curious why, the fire department is concerned about them, and are they concerned about it because of a safety issue, or just because they don't like the fact that there's houses back there that are condemned, that maybe they should, but that may cause some issues with them in the future, whether it be people.
Yeah, valid for discussion.
Well,
I think some folks who live in the residences to the west there actually also asked about them as well, so.
I mean, it's a concern, anytime you have abandoned houses, sometimes you get people squatting in them and you wind up with fires as well, so.
So there's a couple of issues related to, abandoned houses and uninhabitable. There's kind of 2 different standards. One standard is an unsafe structure, which is typically a question of structural stability. And then uninhabitable is a different category. Uninhabitable could be the heating system is not functioning, the plumbing is not functioning, it may not be fit for human habitation. To the extent that the building is not inhabited, there's an obligation under the New York State Property Maintenance Code to keep the building secured so that squatters can't get in, kids can't get in, it can't be vandalized. And that's an ongoing legal requirement that is in place absent this board doing anything.
Okay.
So there's an obligation for the property owner to maintain that building and to keep it safe and to prevent people from entering it so long as it is vacant. I would advise the applicant regarding those buildings, there's probably a question regarding getting building permits on those buildings since I don't know the status of this road. It's not, I believe it's a private road.
Private dirt road, yeah.
So you get a 280A, Town Law 280A issue as to whether or not a building permit can be issued since it actually does not have frontage on a town road. So that's an issue that you should look at regarding these buildings. There's some different schools of thought as to does 280A apply to an existing structure that's being renovated, or does it only apply to new structures to be created? But so that's an issue regarding doing work on these buildings that should be addressed. And but again, that's kind of a function because here the access to this portion of the site is through the front of the Duchess property. None of those 280A issues come into play, but once you start looking at those lots and the houses in the back, now you're going to have to look at, is there access on a public highway?
Yeah, I mean, there's an easement across the Dutch Dodge as well, to that even.
So you're going to have to look at, what's the status of, is that a private road? Under 280A, there's open development areas and, there's it's a lot more complicated in a town than someplace else.
I know the houses just look in rough shape, and as George said, they're condemned currently with the sign.
And that's one of the reasons why the applicant doesn't want to knock them down because, they are existing. And I believe under the renovation, something that's pre-existing, again, we'll have to look at the code, but, it's my understanding that's already existing, so it's.
So that would be, for purposes of 288, it's going to be treated differently.
Right.
So maybe the way to deal with the concern right now is to just throwing this out there, I don't know, could we add as a condition that, that the buildings be looked at by our building department once again, just to make sure that they're adequately secured?
Right.
So that, because I don't know when the last time anyone's gone out and looked at those buildings, but maybe just to make sure that they're not, an easy target for vandalism or for anything like that.
I think that's an appropriate condition.
That sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
One other thing. Kristen, I think last time we discussed some issues perhaps with the lighting. Have you reviewed those and are you satisfied?
I don't recall any issues in my review,
brightness,
so.
Brightness.
There's just a
everything?
concern of how
We're
bright
okay with that?
the neighbors,
We're okay with it?
Yeah, they provided a photometrics plan, I believe, and it might have been actually in a previous submittal, and they met the requirements that they needed to.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And they also provided additional landscaping and screening around the inventory parking lot as well to help.
Okay, all right, thank you.
increase those trees. Nicole?
No, everyone has already spoke about the things that I was wondering about, specifically those two structures. So I have nothing further.
All right, thanks. Ben?
They covered everything.
And Peter?
When I'm looking at the photometrics, it appears to me that there are a couple of hot spots in the interior. I think we're at 1.0 is the town limit, and you've got 4.8 and 3.8 on the interior, not around the perimeter, but in the interior of the lot.
Right, and the code is at the property line. The 1.0 is at the property line,
Okay,
so
so we're good.
Yeah, the lighting actually that we're proposing is very low
Shielded.
level. It's just security lighting.
Okay. There also was a concern about the 24-foot minimum aisle width from the fire department. Have you addressed that?
That was a comment that was misunderstood when we resubmitted. But we thought it had to do with the proposed parking lot or the proposed storage area, when in fact, they're looking at the existing Dutchess Dodge parking lot that's there now. So what we're gonna do is go back and take a look at that, and if we need to make changes to the striping, which ultimately would mean eliminating some parking spaces, we would do that to make sure that we have the 24-foot minimum.
Okay, so we would make that a condition of the approval. The other thing is, getting back to what the chief said, or no, captain, sorry, about those unsafe structures. You representing that it's the intention of the applicant eventually to go in and obtain a building permit and address the issues that are currently involved there. Would it be unreasonable to ask to make that a condition, going in there and obtaining those building permits and consulting with Captain Finn or some other representative from the fire department? Because it sounds like they have some pretty serious concerns.
As of right now, the applicant is in contract to buy the lots, which is gonna be subject to any approval, so.
Sure.
Once
I mean,
that-
after he takes possession.
Right, once he takes possession, his intention is to really digest what's going on
Yeah,
there.
I'm sure, there's no question about it, he's well-intended. We have an opportunity now, probably the only opportunity that we really would have, and if I'm on shaky ground here, you can.
Well, I think what was mentioned previously about the building inspector going out to the site and doing an inspection on whether it's safe or not, I believe the applicant would be fully on board with that. He doesn't want anything unsafe on his property.
I guess the one issue regarding conditioning building permits, if the applicant determines that the buildings are unsalvageable, he's most likely gonna get a demo permit and just tear it down. So, I don't think at this point, and I don't know how much investigation he's done as to, the stability of those buildings. So I think also since they're on a separate lot, I mean, they're not necessarily on this lot, so, there's a lot of different issues with respect to, building, while they're in common ownership, they're separate buildings, and they're really not, at this point in time, I think. I mean, there's also issues, you've got, two buildings on one lot. I don't know how that's gonna be treated. So it looks like there's a lot of issues related to that. You've also got a neighboring parcel that's got an easement or some, this one looks like it's pretty complicated to sort out. I think if it was a little bit more straightforward, I think it would be appropriate to put in conditions, but this seems to be kind of a hodgepodge would take some time to sort through.
The town has a property maintenance ordinance.
Right. So, I mean, I think one of the issues regarding, an unsafe structure, if it was unsafe and in danger of collapsing, the town has the ability to send a notice to the owner, make them tear the building down. Should they not do that, the town can go in, hire a contractor to do it, put a lien on the property. So there's a mechanism in place in the code as it stands to do that.
It seems like condemned is a step beyond unsafe. Is it a step beyond?
No, it's actually,
the
again,
same?
without seeing what the order says, it's unclear. Condemned is not really the term of art. So without seeing the notice in front of you, again, uninhabitable, posted as uninhabitable can mean different things.
So the condition that we have it inspected again by the building department to ensure that it's either being secured properly, or if it maybe has.
We could at least
And if there's,
do that.
if there's
least-
structural issues, and, send the notice to the owner.
And that can be done in a timely manner.
Sure.
Which.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like the fire department's pretty concerned about those
Yeah.
buildings, so we should, whatever we can do, I think we should do.
Yep, at least have that condition to take a look.
I
at.
mean, and the structural issues actually are within the purview of the building inspector rather than the fire department.
They're the right guys to take a look. Thanks.
And I just also wanted to mention that the two structures are on two separate parcels. They're not on one parcel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a parcel within a
It's
parcel.
a very strange setup.
Yeah, it's not,
With all one connecting private driveway. Which crosses the Dutchess Dodge parcel as well. I guess, my 2 cents is I liked your version of, I think that would be okay from the sidewalk point to tie it in through the same way that it did to the south. There's just too many people walking in the median on Route 9 these days, so I'd like to see something connected there. If you can just put some paint down, work with the department, see if it's outside, if it's outside if it's within your parcel, you should be able to put some paint stripes down without the DOT getting involved as well.
I mean, the other issue is, if DOT, rather than, they may accept an easement, to the extent you extend the right-of-way onto the parcel by means of an easement, put the sidewalk in.
If there's
That may
something,
would as
if
well.
there's because I know the one connecting from the south is fairly far off the road. It's got a good buffer, so it may not even be on DOT's land already. That should be looked at with the planning staff, I think.
Staff at DOT's changed, so what worked a month ago?
I think if the pedestrian access is entirely internal to the lots and doesn't touch Route 9,
Right.
then DOT's not involved.
Right, that's what I'm thinking. Because there is a lot of obstructions in the path right along the highway, as you said. There's some storm drains there as well, looks like. All right. Yep. And also to work with the staff to investigate.
I move that the planning board grant conditional lot line approval subject to the following. 1, this lot line revision approval shall be valid from the date of planning board approval through Monday, October 14, 2019. The owner's applicant shall receive no notice of the pending expiration, and it is the sole responsibility of owner's applicant to complete conditions of planning board approval and to file a signed plat with the Dutchess County Clerk prior to its expiration.
Second.
Moved and seconded for lot line approval. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the planning board grant conditional special use permit approval and conditional site plan approval, subject to the following. Respond to comments of the planning board and those received from town departments and agencies, and said response to be reviewed by the planning department as to adequacy, completeness, inclusive of, but not limited to the following. 1 through 5, that the town will be able to look at the 2 parcels currently posted as condemned and unsafe before applying for a building permit. And 6, work with staff to investigate possible sidewalk off of Route 9.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Haifa Holdings LLC, 819 Main Street, public hearing, seeker review and special use permit review for a site plan review, proposed construction of a 3-story mixed-use building, commercial on the first floor and 12 residential units on the upper floors. I move that the planning board adjourn the public hearing, November 19th, 2019. Moved and seconded, call to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up, Eastdale Village. Amended site plan hearing for proposed Fourth Amendment to the previously approved mixed-use Eastdale Village site plan, including revised mixed-use buildings A and E and outdoor dining areas, and revised residential buildings 2, 3, 16, and 17. Lighting, signs, and landscaping as well. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Kane with Kirchhoff Properties, representing Eastdale Village.
Hi, I'm Jeff Quintelmo from Insight Engineering, Surveying, and Landscape Architecture.
All right. So you got a presentation ready, booting up. Looks like construction is going pretty well out there.
Yes. Sorry, let me just get this. Let's start here. I don't know if you want to dim the lights so the public can see that, or
I did dim the lights in the
Oh,
front,
okay,
I
all
think,
right.
yeah.
Oh, it's still loading on the screen.
It's still
I think
loading on
that's
the screen, I think
right,
that's the
that's the
issue here, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, construction is moving ahead on the site. We have a number of buildings up and under construction. I can't, this is not live yet.
That looks better.
Again, this is an overview of the west side of the project. Currently under construction are the three-story residential buildings, 11, 10, 9, 8, and 7. Those are up and in fact, building 11 all the way to the south on the site is nearly complete. That'll be our building with models. Building 1, which is the 50-unit, three-story elevator service building, is up and the finish work is ongoing there. The medical office building is up and all of the electrical and mechanical rough-in work is ongoing in that structure. We have the mail and leasing building under construction, and one of the cottages, Cottage D1, has been framed and waiting to get the trusses and roof on that structure. So quite a bit is going on in terms of the buildings, and a lot of the infrastructure, water, sewer, drainage are going in as we probably as we sit here. The work in the Route 44, the DOT work is proceeding across the frontage. This coming week, we will be working at night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings. There will be night work in that region, in that area. There will be one lane open overnight, but we have to close it down from the current 2-lane configuration to 1 lane to be able to get some drainage and communication structures, communication lines across the road. So we have 1 night of night work, then we're back to the regular day schedule. Again, 2 lanes remaining open on 44 during the remainder of the roadway construction. Any questions about the construction? I guess before I launch into what this, and if somebody has any questions, thoughts, so.
I mean, do you know how long it's going to be to, the current bypass configuration?
So the 2-lane switch will There will always be two lanes open, but depending on which side of the road that we're working on, and sometimes it's it even chicanes a little bit in the middle, really depends on day to day. But for the most part, we're going to be working on this side the way it is right now for the next month, and then there will be a somewhat of a semi-permanent switch where we'll then move the traffic to the new pavement and be working on the other side of the road for the remainder. So again, it's the schedule changes a little bit as we move ahead and are able to accomplish some things. One of the other things on the east side, we're almost complete with undergrounding the existing overhead lines, electric, Verizon, Spectrum, Windstream, Crown Castle, and Cablevision. We're all on those lines, and they're being undergrounded. So that work is almost complete, and those poles can come out. We expect those poles to be down by the end of this month, maybe the first month in September. So that's that undergrounding process has moved ahead. That pole removal process you'll see soon. So we're here this evening.
Just a quick question before we move on from this. That you have adjacent to the Frank property, there's a meter pit.
Yes.
And I remember when we visited there was quite a bit of water in that pit. And it looks like you have like an outdoor dining area situated on top of that area. And I actually had chatted with Mr. Frank. He mentioned, and I think I'd mentioned to you that there was an underground stream, that's been was through there long before the Frank brothers were there. Have you had any problems with that water? Or?
So interesting, right? So we did a number of borings here before we ever started work, and would occasionally hit some groundwater at 7, 8, 9 feet down, and then it's dry below. And what we really found as we're excavating there is in some areas of the site there is a lens of again 8 or 9 feet down. There's a lens of a more impermeable layer, some clay, and water gets perched above it, and then once that. So it's not really a river, but it was holding water up. And once that layer was broached, water goes away, and we haven't had any issues with standing water. That's just one of the areas where there was still that clay layer holding some rainwater back.
So you're able to drain it.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of self drains.
Great.
We haven't had any issues, so it's been good.
I'd also like to tell you that. Based on what I saw anyway, you were really doing a terrific job in terms of the quality of construction. It's really, you're doing everything that you said you were going to do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I said it before, but I just, again, it's the project has been able to move ahead and stay on schedule, and we've been able to get some efficiencies because of, I think, working with this board and the other agencies and boards has really enabled the project to move ahead. We broke ground less than a year ago. We were approved last July and broke ground within within about a month from there. So the ability to get out of the ground quickly after the approval here is really, again, a credit to the work that the town has done, because I think you all see it. You'll approve a project and then it doesn't break ground for a long time, and so why were we in a hurry? Well, we were able to get in a hurry. We were motivated. We were mobilized and able to move through that. And so again, I just want to say thank you for working with us. And there are issues that come up, and we were able to work through them. So again,
you had a good winter and everything for construction, so it worked out. Let's move on to why you're here tonight.
Sure, absolutely. So there are really kind of 4 areas of change on the plans that you have in front of you. Number one is the 4 buildings, A and E, at the front of Eastdale Avenue and 44. Those have kind of been somewhat amorphous in their design, and so as we've been working through the leasing process with a number of local businesses, these buildings have taken a real shape and a real form, and so building A is now described. It's really two separate buildings, really six separate buildings. We imagine each of these buildings are built party walls between the ones that are actually connected. But we've got really six buildings there, and then five buildings on Building E, and the buildings will be separate, standalone. Again, there'll be a party wall there, but they will have their own separate architecture, separate entrances and exits, separate utilities serving each of these buildings. But we've been able to really define those buildings more completely to meet the needs of the tenants there. So that's really been going well. There's in the and I can go through this if you want to, but we've talked about in the submission the number of stories of each of these buildings. And then there are, above each of them, there are also residential units, 1 or 2 bedroom residential units depending, that are included and part of this development. So for the most part, the A buildings on the south side of Eastdale Avenue, those are all proposed to be 2-story, again, at this point, with the proposed lessees. Some of them have basements, some of them don't. On the other side, on the north side of Eastdale Avenue there, this front building, Building E1, is proposed as a 3-story building, drops back down to 2 2-story buildings, and then a 3-story building for the larger E4 building, and then back to a 2-story building. So we're going to get some variation in height as the buildings are further developed. Architecture isn't complete on these. Really, kind of our approach on this is we have partner tenants and owners in these buildings. Is that we'll ask for site plan approval. Once site plan approval has been granted, then we'll go back out, finish the funding with the lenders, complete that. That releases all of the remaining funds to complete the architecture. We'll come back then at that point for architecture review, and then be able to get those buildings move forward. Although a couple of these, I expect that'll be much more rapid than others. With some certainly this late summer or fall, we expect to be back in here and talking to you more specifics. And then some will be again later in the winter of the end of this year and beginning of next, is kind of how that plays out. But the site plan approval for this is really really the critical step to moving these forward. Obviously, the changes on these buildings, we've had some minor tweaks in water and sewer and drainage, and I say they really are minor. I did misspeak in the application. We said there were no changes in the current SWIP. There will be an amended SWIP because of some of the changes. Jeff corrected me, but it was too late. I'd already put the letter out there. So there will be an amendment that'll need to be reviewed by the town engineer. We also modified the lighting and landscaping along Eastdale Avenue here. We increased or really decreased the spacing and increased the number of both trees and lights along this frontage here. We thought that gave it a better commercial street view coming down Eastdale Avenue. So we have paid some attention to how that's going to look and increase the features on the street as you come down Eastdale Avenue. The third thing that we changed is we modified our phasing plan. The phase now for this first phase, or what we call phase 1 and phase 2A, really includes everything on the west side of 44, with the exception of these 2 pads out front, what we've called the bank and the daycare buildings F and G. So those are not included in this kind of initial phase. So we are moving forward with the infrastructure and the work on the rest of those buildings. And again, following site plan approval, we'll certainly be following up with building permits for the remaining buildings. The buildings that weren't in the initial phase that we've added are these 2 buildings back here. Again, 3-story elevator buildings, 2 and 3. the townhouses, buildings 4, 5, and 6. The remainder of the commercial building B, and I think those are the only additions to the phasing plan.
Yeah,
But again, it's
the garages in back also?
I'm sorry, say again?
The garages in the back also?
Oh, and the garage in the back, yes, yes. I don't have them in my window here, but yes, and the garage in the back, yes, thank you. Right. And then the last change was something that was contemplated in all the secret documents, and that was the outdoor dining. I'll go back to the commercial buildings, but we have tenants, restaurant tenants that want outdoor dining for both building E1 and building E5. That'll have some outdoor seating for patrons at both of those buildings. There are specific requirements in the zoning code related to outdoor dining. And, I believe as we described it, we meet those specific requirements.
Are they the only restaurants then, or
I'm sorry?
Are they the only restaurant tenants, or are there additional?
No, there may be other restaurants as well.
Yeah, you have wide sidewalks, so they're always free to put a couple tables out too.
Yes, yes, and there may be some uses out in the front here, but these particularly lent themselves to a larger to more defined outdoor dining. So,
all right, is that all?
That was all right. Yes, initially. So we have some questions and comments about some of your comments. So, but yes, that was.
Yep, we'll get into that.
Sure.
Let me go to Eric.
Sure. Staff, we have a number of comments. There's a few for discussion by the board packets. But assuming the board indicates some direction on those, then we're recommending that you could proceed with a conditioned approval. I will note that in the resolution for that purpose we've provided you at the end, there's a typographical error in which it's printed as an approval for the third amended site plan, where that should be an approval for the fourth amended site plan. That's a typographical error in your resolution that should be corrected. Otherwise, I guess maybe the comments worthy of some discussion would be with regard to the outdoor dining areas. Although the planning board has control over all the bulk regulations, we thought you might have a discussion with the applicant about the proximity of the larger of the outdoor dining areas to the adjacent off-site residential property. And then the board was also interested in the degree to which that may change screening from Route 44. Also, the applicant has proposed changes has looked at some changes in parking, where there's somewhat of a little bit of a loss on the west side of Route 44, an increase on the east side. There's a net change of only 4 spaces. But the planning board may just want to confirm that it's okay with not looking at whether or not is comfortable with not counting the outdoor dining towards an increased parking demand. We're comfortable with that, but it's a requirement that you may want to address.
I think there was some land bank parking somewhere also.
There is land bank parking elsewhere, correct. So I don't think it'll be an issue, but you may want to weigh in on that.
Bring that up.
And then the other day, not in our review, a residential neighbor just south of the main entrance. I wonder if, Jeff, if you might just address what changes, if any, there have been around for the buffering or parking around that property, which we didn't really look at, but I guess in particular, I'd be interested to know if there's a driveway, a proposed drop curb connection between the parking area there and the residential property. If you could, are you able to show that that's temporary or is it permanent? And is there any change to the buffering along that residential property boundary?
Which property are we talking about, Eric? I'm sorry.
NF McCaffrey?
The McCaffrey property? Yeah. So, and your question, sorry, again, is?
Well, two. One is there any change to the proximity of parking or the buffering for that property from previous versions? No. And then can the ramp or connection there's a vehicular connection, which I imagine is temporary during the construction on 44. Is that intended as temporary or permanent?
I'm not sure what vehicular connection in the rear, and you put the screen up, but I assume the screens are still on in front of you, right? You can see what I'm doing.
Off at the
No, they're off.
Okay. They're at the,
I have it here.
okay, at the rear of the McCaffrey property, when they had asked for, there's a fence there, they'd asked for a gate at the fence because they have a, right. They'd asked to be able to access, if necessary, to drive their vehicles through. There's a camper there to be able to exit onto the property. So that gate has always been there. That access was always one of the things that we talked about. That is not something expected to be used. They just asked to have a gate at the rear of the property to be able to exit the back end of their driveway. So we accommodated them and put the gate in.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's Eric, if that's what you're referring to at the backside. So. Yeah.
Okay. That's, so those are our comments.
Great, thanks, Eric. Any new engineering issues right now?
Jeff already mentioned the SWIP addendum, which we had asked for. We wanted to see a little bit more detail on the Ortega connection. And just curious as to what the generator is going to be doing out by the parking area.
I'm gonna do the generator first. That's 3 seconds. That's the elevators in buildings 1, 2, and 3 will be on that generator. So it's just as a backup to power those. So is number one. The temporary access or future access to the Ortega property. And if I can zoom in a little bit here. Again, this is the Ortega site, and it's currently the home of the leasing office for Eastdale. We have, again, it was purchased. We have not really integrated it into the overall site here, but we know at some point we're probably going to want to. So rather than build curbing or build a situation out here that we're going to want to then rip out within the year, we thought let's show what could be a future driveway access into the Ortega site, show a temporary grass berm so you can't drive through there. I did notice that one of the plans, it actually shows a construction entrance pad that's not supposed to be on these plans. That'll come back out. That construction entrance. It's not what's expected to happen there. This is just kind of a future condition. We're trying to think ahead into the site so we would have fewer changes in the future. So. We've got a berm there, and created really these two islands to channel traffic in the future. As part of this process, part of the phasing plan, we recognize that to build Eastdale Avenue, we don't want people using the sidewalks right here in front of these buildings when we have to build the building right here. And it's too unsafe. So recognizing that and recognizing we're going to want to break ground on those buildings, what's the other right spot to have pedestrian access from our buildings out into the sidewalk network across 44. And so it became an opportunity to create some pedestrian access from Founders Way behind the residential onto the current driveway for Ortega, and then back out into the sidewalk network. The good questions raised. Well, what about automobile versus pedestrian there? Because that's a driveway in use. But what happens? And we'll put notes in the plan. We will abandon the any use of the over the Ortega site, and we'll put a vehicle barrier at the front of the Ortega driveway before we ask for any CO on these properties back here, so that this will be available only for pedestrian access as opposed to some mix of pedestrian and vehicular. And I think that might address the issues and concerns.
All right. So any future use to the Ortega property that you're able to say?
Again, we've drawn 25 options. So there's nothing yet that's reached the point where we're quite ready to bring it in front of you. But the idea is to create a, really a consistent frontage across the site. And that was, again, it was an opportunity to acquire that property. And so we're just trying to see how that would fit into everything else. But,
Right.
but we would, again, ultimately be accessing it from within Founder's Way as opposed to from 44.
Right, this is a public hearing. I move that we open the public hearing for this project.
Second.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes 6-0. Is there anyone in the audience wish to comment on this application tonight? Seeing none, I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes 6-0. All right, let's go around the board for additional comments. Start with Nicole.
Yep, so building E1, where you're gonna have that outdoor dining, the one that's close to the Frank parcel there, is there any way to move it away from his property just a little bit more, so there's just a little bit more of a barrier? Because I know, with outdoor dining, maybe it can get loud, maybe there's music, so.
I believe music is prohibited by your code.
Well,
Right, so-
unless you
Right.
got a special permit for some type of
event
or something like that.
So, there was an intent, I guess, because there wasn't an intent to have music out there. So the space, that space is, and I want to talk about the meter pit as well, because that's also in that area in the town's easement. So the idea is we could certainly add some screening. The code for outdoor dining, the code says the outdoor dining shall match the setback to a building for that zone. These buildings have both a side and rear setback of 0. As we didn't take it all the way to the edge, we did provide some further feedback and some further setback to the Frank property. We didn't show plantings there, again, knowing those are in the town's easement, but maybe there's an opportunity to maybe have some, if Mr. Frank would agree, and if the board agreed, we could have some more plantings perhaps on the corner of the Frank property on the other side of the line, so it's not in the water meter easement, if that was, again, something acceptable, or we could have, maybe some trees and planters back there to provide some screening, if that's something that would be acceptable.
Trying to remember, is there a fence proposed there at all, or is it just the?
There's a low fence, there's a low fence proposed as, but along that border, again, we could probably bring that up to a taller fence. If that were we didn't want it to feel, didn't want it to, as an outdoor dining area, didn't want it to feel like you were in.
Closed in, yeah.
A box, right, so, but one side wouldn't necessarily give you that feeling. We could probably do that.
Anything else, Nicole?
Yeah, just, with outdoor dining also, I saw that you didn't have any type of lighting plan or anything for that. So, of course, I'm sure there'll be some type of outdoor lighting, so just want to make sure that it stays at that 0.1 foot candle, since it's going to be right there, neighboring his property.
Right, the intent was building lighting, but we'll update and show some lighting there.
Okay. And that was it for now.
Okay.
Thanks.
While we're on that, if I can ask Don this question, there's, again, one of the comments was to take the outdoor dining area out of the town's easement for the meter pit. We had not proposed concrete. These were proposed, pavers certainly in that area, so there could be an access easement. Is that an acceptable means of addressing that comment, or should we talk to the water department further about that? That's
Yeah, I would think you would want to talk to them. Maybe there should be language in the easement that requires you to repair if they have to go in and do anything, something like that.
Where exactly is that meter pit in relation to the outdoor dining patio? Is that
Give me a
hard to see on my small copy here?
I'm struggling with, here we go, all right.
I think 3.1 shows.
I went too far now. Right.
3.1 shows it best.
Zoom in.
Jeff, that's sheet 10 of 40.
Yeah, it's still going the other direction, sorry,
Oops, sorry.
there we go.
Okay, so it's off. Off to the side there.
The dining area, in between the dining property.
Yep. Just trying to understand how accessible that is from the patio there.
So the easement is this, hatched area here, right? And then this fence symbol shows the outdoor dining area.
Okay, so it overlaps it a little bit there.
Right, so it overlaps it probably 20 feet into the outdoor dining area. Which is significant for the, again, for the success of the tenant here, the owner. So, with understanding that, yes, that there would need to be access when there needs to be access.
Right.
That's why we weren't proposing anything permanent over the,
Okay,
in the easement or over the pit itself.
as long as the water department's satisfied, I guess that's,
Right, okay.
let's see. Anything else, Nicole?
No, that was it for now.
Rocco?
And just sticking with that outdoor area a little bit, looks like if you go back to the previous one that showed more sidewalk there, I guess the builder moved in a little bit. Would there be tables on the outside of that, on the 44 side?
There's not a proposal to put tables out there, so the intent was to contain the outdoor dining within that little fenced-in area, but not extend it out.
So it's going to be a low fence all around it?
Yes.
Okay, because the other issue was that, what's the setback from 44, and is there any hazard that car might go up in there?
Yeah, right, and we've kept them 20 feet back from the 44 curb line, so.
All right.
Okay.
And that expanded sidewalk area to the west or east of there, in front of building E1 there that you have, so that's going to be approximately 20 feet wide.
Yes.
All right, and that would be in addition to the sidewalk?
Well, I guess that's really from the, I was measuring from the curb face back. I call that all sidewalk, or it's all patio. It's all really kind of one concrete plaza. I wasn't.
It won't be two different surfaces at two different levels?
The plan shows the grid, which may help.
Yeah, no, yes, they're all at the same level. We've been working a lot with DOT and with the drawings there to keep that to look as one contiguous plaza there. Yes.
As long as you've addressed the safety issue, I'm okay.
Okay. Thanks, Rocco. Joan?
I would just echo Nicole's concerns about a taller fence along the property line with Frank. That'd be my primary concern. Thank you.
Thanks. Ben? Anything?
No, I think I had some questions about the outdoor dining too, but I think it's been covered. Thank you.
Great. And Peter?
Well, here's a surprise. I have a question about outdoor dining. Is this a franchise?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the dimensions that you have here.
It's not a national franchise. I don't know if there's another.
I'm just wondering if they had a requirement for square footage for the outdoor dining. Some franchises have a pretty strict requirement.
Yeah, it
So
is not.
my question is, when I'm looking at, and of course some of the scale here is kind of crazy to figure out, but it looks like it's about 40 by 40 foot square. That's 1,600 square feet. It seems like an ample amount of outdoor dining space when I look at the size of the restaurant itself. And if you could, in some way, if you diminished that just partially, would give you some extra space on the Frank side the Frank property side to give everybody a little bit of breathing room. Anyway, it's just food for thought, that's all. On Eastdale Avenue, you're squeezing. Is there a median on Eastdale Avenue?
There's not a median. You said we're squeezing. I'm not.
I thought you said you were going to diminish the width of Eastdale.
No, I'm sorry. We diminished the spacing between the trees. The number of trees and lights down Eastdale Avenue increased. So we decreased the spacing as you're driving down the road, but the width of Eastdale Avenue remained the same. So we decided that they were, I think they were 30 feet on center and went to 20, if I remember right, just so it gave you more trees and more lights as you're going down the street.
My question really is, since you're going to have pedestrian traffic on either side of Eastdale, have you considered at all any kind of traffic calming device on Eastdale to make it just in term for safety purposes?
Right, the parallel parking is certainly part of it. The other thing that we have, sorry, it shows better on the layout plan.
Yeah, you don't have to go crazy.
No, it's right. It's important. Is
that's
so
Eastdale.
this so we have both. We have the stamped pavement here to really provide a sense to the driving public that this is a pedestrian area, so it's a change in texture and color. So stamped colored pavement at both this intersection with Founder's Way and this intersection with Town Center Drive will have some traffic calming. The parallel parking with the bump outs of the curbing at the corners also slows it down.
I'm just thinking about, since you are going to have people are going to be entering the store from the street. You know, and you have drivers trying to make that light on Route 44. I'm just thinking about human nature. If there's some way to if you think you have sufficient traffic calming,
right? And again, the striping and in the center here, yes, for a median, there's not a raised median, but there certainly is a bullnose median at the further end, and then we have the turning lanes as you get closer to the signal. So we think we've really tried to make this pedestrian friendly and make the drivers pedestrian aware. One of the things we've also talked internally, we're gonna add our speed limit signs limited to 15 again. So there's again some awareness of the driving public that this is really a go slow zone in here, because you know, I will tell you, we've talked about, does there need to be kind of a mid-block pedestrian crossing here. We don't think so, but I'm going to reserve that thought and come back to you.
Okay,
And,
good.
you know, if we think it's creating a problem, we're going to come back and talk to you about wanting to add a crosswalk in the middle there. And we just need to make sure that doesn't, you know,
Okay, I understand. It's
doesn't back traffic out onto 44 or have some other, you know, some other kind of pushback that we didn't take into account. But we are trying to be aware of that.
Is the land bank parking on the east side?
The land bank parking currently is all on the other side.
Okay, I'm just saying we should be mindful because we're losing some parking spaces here. We don't know really what's going to happen in the future. So I just don't want us to be over generous. If there is, in the changes that come up, especially on the west side, if there's a continued deficit in parking, we're going to probably take a close look at that. On the buildings E and A that are facing Route 44, like I'll call them the gable ends of those buildings, we're going to want to see something. You know, these buildings are great. I mean, these renderings that you gave us. I mean, they're everything. McDonald Heights Town Center. You know, this is pretty much, I think, what the town board had in mind when they conceived of this idea. And honestly, I never thought anyone could pull it off. But I mean, you're actually accomplishing what they had conceived could possibly happen. But we want to, when it comes to when we get to architectural review, we're going to want to take a look at the gable ends of those buildings since they are going to be facing Route 44. And, you know, it's going to be the first impression that people get, not only when they drive by, but when they drive in, which is something I'm sure that you want people to be driving in. So, and also, you know, we're seeing one elevation on the drawings that we got. You know, we wanted to take a look at both elevations since, you know, again, people that live there and the people who are going to be your customers are going to want to have a good impression.
Absolutely, yeah. The backs of these buildings isn't going to be hidden. You're right. That's we'll have to.
And like I said, they're going to have to walk around to the front of the building to gain access. There's not going to be access in the rear of the building off the parking lot.
Correct.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
Well, right, there'll be service entrances, there'll be residential entrances, but it's as intended, yeah, the public will enter the front doors.
Great, thanks.
One last note on the outdoor dining. Are they both going to be strictly al fresco, or are they anticipating any kind of canopy or awning or anything like that?
I don't know if a canopy is proposed.
I was just thinking more, maybe for the smaller one.
Mm-hmm. Right, there might be something over the edge of the building there that, which would,
kinda big.
yeah, right, that's, actually would probably make sense.
Some weather protection, yeah.
Yeah, sun, right, you get both. Yeah,
I suppose those are things we would look at during architectural,
Yeah.
right, as well as like the fence, what the fence along 44 looks like.
I mean, throwing my 2 cents, I was focused on the architecture as well when I saw these plans as well, from how it's going to look, because it was originally proposed as the 2 3-story buildings here, and they're all L-shaped. And now you got a 3-story on one side and a 2-story with I don't know if you can explain the 1-story little thing sticking out, but how's that whole thing going to look as a streetscape viewpoint? Because that's, it's not quite these conceptual plans.
Right, those were just those were very conceptual to how we wanted the streetscape to ultimately look, and that's why I said as we develop the architecture, we'll come back building by building and explain that to you. But this 1-story building is really a loading area for the user in this building. So that's the intended for that to be. They'll back their vehicles in here and load within the building and be able to leave the site again. So, but having said that, it absolutely has to have some architectural consistency with the rest of the structures.
Not some little flat roofed things.
It's not going to be a little flat roof shed. No, that's right. But that's kind of the use of the building.
All right. Just I want you to keep that in mind with the architect. I don't know if you have the same architect that did the concept drawings or not, but you've got.
And yes, that we do. Right.
And my other concern from a viewpoint, from a view shed point of view, is now that the buildings have shrunk from the L shape, that what they were accomplishing was hiding the parking lots in back as well. So I don't know if there can be some additional screening or whatever it is, so you're not really staring at the parking from Route 44 walking along.
So I just want to look at the landscape plan, just again, so I can understand the comment.
You're just.
So I think you're particularly focused in this area?
That area, and then even the other one,
and-
looking
and
across,
here?
from Route 44, you're looking right across the dining patio into the parking
Mhm.
area now. I guess you said there's a 3-foot fence that.
Right. We've got, pavement and concrete out here. Is adding more screening back here acceptable? Again, if the
That's
goal
what
is
I
to
was-
hide the parking, is that what? is
Yeah,
that what you're-
basically.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Because of the L shape of the three-story
Yes,
L
right,
shape.
it did extend further out,
And it's the
yes,
same,
yeah.
and on the other side of the street was the same way, so.
Right, yeah, we did beef up the landscaping here more, but we didn't as
Right.
much here, so, yeah, sure.
All right. And I guess I'd throw in my 2 cents too about the, next to the Frank property. I don't know if you can work with staff on some additional screening or whatever is needed there.
Okay.
Is there still planning to be mixed use, so there's some apartments above some of these?
Yes, each of these has apartments again, it varies if they're 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartments above each of the structures. But they all have uses, residential uses above. Which again, we think is very important to the nature of Eastdale Village, that you have that residential above commercial.
Mm-hmm.
It adds life into the streets. It adds people there full time. But again, we're very happy that concept has worked out in the marketplace. Right, so.
That's good. I just wanted to double check that now that you have tenants in mind and everything was being modified slightly. All right, I think we're good then.
Thank you.
I move that the planning board find that the action contemplated by the Eastdale Village Fourth Amended Site Plans revised through July 22nd, 2019, and by correspondence and attachments dated July 22nd, 2019, is consistent with seeker findings statement for the McDonald Heights Town Center as adapted March 15, 2018. And I move that the planning board grant conditional amended site plan approval for the Eastdale Village Fourth Amended Site Plan, subject to the following. Respond to the comments of all reviewing departments and agencies. Said responses to be reviewed by the planning department as to adequacy and completeness, including but not limited to the following, 1 through 10.
And I'd like to add, what we've discussed, the screening for the parking and the screening for the Frank Brothers property.
And 11 is screening for
Bless you.
parking. And screening for the outdoor dining.
From Frank's Brothers.
Okay.
Second.
Frank property. Moved and seconded. Call to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I assume you'll be back for architectural sometime in
And
the
we'll
near
be back
future.
for architectural review. Yes, yes.
Next up is Arlington Dental. Public hearing and seeker review and site plan review and architectural review for a proposed addition of a new entry vestibule and a new signage for the existing business at 876 Dutchess Turnpike. Zoned IH Heavy Industrial, 0.677 acres. It's a type 2 action. Ira Stair and Velvet Stair and Amelia Stair as owners. Welcome.
Thank you.
So what are you proposing to do here?
I'm David Beckwith, the architect for the project.
Give a brief summary of what you're
All right, well, currently,
going to
as
do.
you probably know, the existing building has a canopy in the front, which covers the front entry steps and the wheelchair lift.
Right.
That canopy also has some lettering on it, some signage, is at the end of its useful life.
Yeah.
So the owner, Iris Deer, Dr. Iris Deer, intends to replace that with a structure that will house the entry steps and the wheelchair lift.
Okay.
Get him out of the weather, make his facility nicer, etc. And then he also plans to replace the sign out by the road as well. And in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's really a maintenance / upgrade to the existing facility.
Okay.
This does nothing to expand the capacity of the building. There's no seating or extra, dental stations, anything like that.
Yep.
So our parking is going to remain exactly as it is. Obviously, the parking lot was recently paved, so it hasn't been striped yet. The handicap spaces haven't been identified. But the plan is that will remain as it is. We'll put in the appropriate signage and markings.
So you're just going to use materials to match, or are you going to reclad the whole house, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. The building now has a brick exterior, and the plan is to match that with a brick wainscot. And then the vestibule addition will have quite a bit of glass, as you can see. The actual entry doors will be, aluminum storefront type of glass, and the windows themselves will probably be a clad residential style window. The exterior will either be stucco or trim, and the roof will match the existing roof shingles. I brought a sample of the existing roof shingles for you.
Okay.
I haven't sourced the bricks yet. I did pick up 2 samples of a Glen Gary brick, but I didn't bring them. They're close, but frankly, I think we can do a little better in terms of matching up.
All right. Thanks. Kristen?
Okay, so the action is a type 2 action. I did have a few comments. I would like to point out that my recommendation to the board was prepared for either direction. We were waiting on county planning comments, and we did receive them this afternoon. I did have a chance to take a look at them, and I actually just confirmed a couple of the comments that were received specifically call out that this parcel is zoned in a residential district. That is not true. It is IH. The property, I believe it's just south. I'm all turned around. The residence next door is R20, and the property on the other side is also IH. So I think they might have had the wrong property selected. So some of the requirements as they relate to signage do not apply. And also, they will be required to provide the zoning department a full signage application, and they would go through that review procedure accordingly in terms of size and
Okay.
other requirements. So,
Great. All right. I suppose there's any engineering issues with this.
No, most of ours are over the ADA parking and the striping and stuff, which I'm sure they'll get figured out before site plan is signed.
Sounds good. This is a public hearing. I move we open the public hearing for this project.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Is there anyone in the audience wish to comment on this site plan? Seeing none, I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Let's go around the board for discussion. I'll start with Peter this time.
You did a nice job. Good luck.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Looks all right to me.
Cole?
Yep, just that those parking spots need to be striped. They haven't been striped ever, I don't think, right? I don't think there was ever striping on there.
They were. At
Really?
least the ones out front where the handicap parking was striped as part of the last site plan approval that
Okay.
he got 7, 8 years ago or so.
Okay. And of course, like Kristen said, the signage, you'll probably have to go with zoning on that because it looks like it's a little big, right?
Yeah, yep, so they'll review that. You would be reviewing it, you know, what's on the building, and what's in the plans from an architectural point of view and how it looks with the whole site, so.
Yeah, okay. And then also, I just had a note here from Water Department. The backflow prevention is overdue and needs to be tested, and you need to provide the certification to the Water Department. And that's
I don't
it.
see a problem there.
All right, thanks. Michael?
Yeah, nothing else. Nice job.
Joe?
I have nothing.
All right, thanks. In my 2 cents also, the sign does look a bit busy when there's people driving by, but a lot of words on there, so it's, makes it, we'll have to work with the department too on that and see what the zoning works out to be. And I believe the county had a comment on the lighting as well, make sure it's downlit, I think, instead of uplit.
Yeah, regarding lighting, my site plan does show the existing lighting. But
Which
I
is-
think we will have, I haven't shown any lighting for the new sign yet.
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
So I'm anticipating, a ground light, on
Yeah,
either side
we'll
that
have
would go.
to, so the code does specify, I'm pretty sure it's prohibited to have uplighting,
Right.
very stringent on the glare.
All right.
So, we'll take a look at the code. I think it's 210, 152. That might be the refuse enclosure code section, so we'll take a look at that and we can talk through it.
All right, that sounds good.
I mean, you got a nice
I don't-
little hat on top of the sign so that you might be able to tuck lights under there
Yeah, all right, yeah.
to look down.
Yeah. Regarding the sign, our intent is to stay within the guidelines.
Sure, yep.
Zoning. And I think we have, but again, I'll be happy to work through that with your folks.
Yeah, it's just an interesting parcel because it does abut the residents next, you have a residential property and then there's heavy industrial, zone property, so just finding a middle ground. And we can work through that at a staff level as well.
You gotta make sure there's no light glaring into somebody's bedroom window or something,
I will tell you, the proposed sign is larger than what is there now. But we're also setting it back a bit too. A bit further than the existing one is.
I guess the other thing to look at is the county, suggested possibly an easement for a future sidewalk, if they want
Oh,
to
okay.
connect it into, to say that the Eastdale Village there. 'Cause it's not too far down the road, so allow people to walk from, who are living there to walk to the dentist. All right. Let's see. That's my 2 cents, so I guess we're ready.
I move that the planning board determine that the proposal meets the criteria for a seeker type 2 action pursuant to seeker part 617.5, requiring no further environmental review.
Second.
Moved and seconded for seeker. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the planning board grant conditional site plan approval for the Arlington Dental application subject to the following. Respond to comments of the planning board and those received from town departments and agencies, and said response to be reviewed by the planning department as to adequacy and completeness, inclusive but not limited to the following 1 through 8. Do you want to put 9? Possible looking into sidewalks.
Sidewalk easement, yeah. Well, that's actually in the county's comments, so
Okay.
we don't have to add 9.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded to grant conditional. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. And now we're on to architectural review. You've given us a good summary overall and shown us the shingle. Does anyone have any architectural questions?
No.
Its materials to match sound good. I move we accept architecture as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Good to
Thank
go.
you.
Next up, Raymond Avenue School Property Development. The Raymond Avenue School is a proposal regarding revised applications for a proposed town board zoning amendment to allow new anchor project use designation and a site plan of mixed-use projects of apartments, clubhouse, commercial space, and a hotel. At this point, I move that we adjourn the site plan public hearing to September 19th, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded for adjournment. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. At this time, I move that we allow public comment on any other items on tonight's agenda.
No. Camelot and Fox Run still need to be adjourned.
Oh, right. Stuck on the back here, sorry.
That's all right.
Next up, Camelot Village Mobile Home Park. It's a public hearing, seeker review, and coastal consistency review and amended site plan review for a proposal to combine an existing mobile home park with an adjoining 1 acre parcel. I move we adjourn to the public hearing to September 19th, 2019. It's been moved and seconded. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up, Fox Run at Fulton, also known as Fairview Commons. Seeker review rezoning recommendations to the town board and amended site plan hearing for previously approved site plan. I move we adjourn the public hearing to September 19th, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. All right, now I move that we allow public comment on other items on tonight's agenda. And we'll please ask you to limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. We will consider the comments made during the meeting, but not respond to them during the meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Is there anyone in the audience wish to comment on any other items on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I move we resume the meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. All right, next up is Central Hudson, Knapp's Corner Substation. Site plan review for a proposed new 115, 69, and 15.8 kilovolt rated substation on 19 Spring Road, zoned R 1.5 acre, single-family residence. It's an unlisted action, Central Hudson Corporation owner.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Mirando. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Cuddy and Fader, and here with Central Hudson this evening.
All right, welcome.
My name is Brian Demisco. I am a project manager with Central Hudson Gas and Electric.
And I'm Greg Lieberman, project manager with the firm EDR.
All right, thanks, guys.
So we're happy to be back.
What have you to say?
we were here in well, it's the best thing to do on a nice August night. So I'm sure you're all thrilled too. We were here in June where we presented some of our updated vegetation and screening measures and some of the other grading details for our proposed substation replacement project on the existing substation site. We received that at that meeting a memo from your consultant Stantec. We then took those comments and responded as quickly as we could. Can't forget those. And we provided a response in a response in July, and then we just received a follow-up memo from your consultant, Stantec, relative to some issues with the existing substation location. And we are in the process of reviewing that memo and reserving comment on that memo at the moment. So tonight may be a quick appearance. We were hoping to be here to take a step forward, but we understand via the planning department memo that they want us to provide some responses or look into the memo that we just received from Stantec. So we're going to be working on that. We're going to coordinate with the town and to move as quickly as we could on that.
All right, thanks. Kristen?
I'm actually deferring to our Stantec consultant, Rebecca.
All right.
Yeah. If you want to introduce yourself too, just for the record, hold them.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Fournier. I'm a New York State PE working for Stantec. I'm a transmission design engineer. We did receive the comments from Central Hudson in July, and that opened up a couple other questions and requests for some additional information, which we did supply last week, so I do know that it was short notice, and I appreciate that you're working on them. So at this time, we'll be waiting for your responses.
Yeah. And I think we also talked about, I should point out, perhaps doing an offline meeting before the next submittal between staff and Stantec and Central Hudson, and just so that we can maybe get to some of those answers a little bit more quickly. And so hopefully have be a little further along for the next appearance.
All right. I'm going to go around the board for any comments. Joan?
I would just hold my comments until we have complete information from the applicant.
More at this time.
Nicole?
Yeah, ultimately, we would like to see the comments that come back from you, so.
Ben?
Same thing, I'd like to hear more from the consultant before we make any further comments.
And Peter?
We don't know what we don't know. And honestly, I mean, we want to make a good decision. I read the report, and your response. There's, things that are very concerning. But we don't know, again, what we don't know. That's why we have the people from Stantec to help us out. We want to make an informed decision. We want to make a good decision. The only way we can do that is to have good information, and that's basically what we want, in fairness to everyone concerned. So that's why we're going through this process. It's really, we've had Central Hudson here before, just for really transmission considerations. Really haven't had a problem with that. This is a horse of a different color completely. And we just want to have a greater understanding of, not that we question any representations that you make, but we have no way of validating ourselves because we don't have that background and training. So I'm just saying, please bear with us so we can sort things out.
I appreciate that.
Well said, Peter. That's my thought as well. We just gotta, when you have to make sure we're looking at everything, as you know, the neighbors are concerned and such, so. All right.
I move that the planning board defer action on this application and direct the applicant to respond to comments of the planning board and those received from town departments and agencies, included but not limited to the following 1 through 4.
Second.
Moved and seconded to defer. Call to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. All right, thanks for stopping by. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is Bob Lubavitch on 63 Vassar Road, site plan review regarding a site plan application for a one-story addition to an existing structure for religious organization and worship-related parking expansion, previously approved in 2009 and expired. at 63 Vassar Road. Welcome back.
Good evening.
So what has transpired on your end since?
Okay, so Alfred Capelli, project architect. Part of the exercise here, if you remember, we talked last week, was to, I guess, get some comments from Eric, from the board, from the other agencies as you distributed the application and the plans. And as mentioned as well, Chazen, who obtained the approval back in 2007, they're going to continue with the project, making those changes and corrections and additions and/or deletions that was brought up during this review period. So that was an important thing to do so that the rabbi could bring that list, if you will, to Chris Lapine, and they would be working, so you won't see me anymore. You'll see the rabbi and Chris perhaps in subsequent meetings. Hopefully there are a few meetings to take care of those issues that need to be addressed. And pretty much that's where we are. And again, it was more a fact-finding mission than anything else. I don't know if there's any additional questions that you may have of us. I know Eric had one or two, but that I can clarify perhaps up front where we are, where we're going. Hopefully it gets built now, and we move forward.
Great, thanks. Yep, we just want to make sure everything is up to speed since it's 10 years since the last time it
Absolutely.
was approved, so.
Things happen, sure.
Yep. Eric?
Yeah, it's a reapproval of a similar plan. There's a couple of information things to be, we're recommending to be included on the plan at present. I think the only question for the board is just to confirm or ask about whether conditions remain the same as far as the parking demand and sufficiency, and if the board is comfortable with that. Just to get that information on the record for your use. That's the comment number 2 on what's the parking. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward, and we'll see what the board for tonight. The board can't take any action tonight because the lead agency's circulation period is still underway. We haven't yet heard back from the other agencies. So the only action for the board to take tonight is to defer the application, and that should give the applicant some time to respond to the comments to the board for the next time. And then we'll also ask just that if you can, there's only a few days left within that period. I don't know that we'll get any further response, but to work with yourself or with Chris to make those plan changes and get them to us for review and responses to these comments for the next time, so the board could consider a public hearing and action on the project.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask that.
And I'll note that, now the application, you've included the architecturals that we didn't have last time, so that helps us to review that, so if anybody, when they go around.
Which you have, they haven't changed, correct?
Yep.
The elevations, the rendering, the building size hasn't changed, and to Eric's point about occupancy, that hasn't changed. Just for point of reference, the shul, the sanctuary, is sized for 60 occupants. Per New York State Code, based on the square footage. There's a separate little room to eat or congregate before or after services. That is sized for 32 occupants. So right now, from a New York State building code point of view, we can't take those separately. We have to take those totally. The building is sized for 92 occupants. Maximum. Whether that'll happen or not, that's to be seen. But the building is sized square footage wise for 92 people.
All right. And that goes back to whether we think the parking is sufficient. So, let's go around board then for comments. Anything engineering first?
Nothing significant.
Okay. Nicole?
So how many parking spaces do you have?
I think we have 10 spaces.
And that's enough for 92 people?
Well, technically.
I mean, I understand, Rabbi, I know on Sabbath, you're supposed to walk traditionally. I'm not sure that that happens, so completely.
A lot of them do.
Okay.
So the question comes up always is what we're going to, what is the right number? God bless.
Yeah, so that's our question to you.
Yeah.
I guess.
Is there any, space at an adjoining property or something?
Well, I mean, the rabbi does own the adjacent parcel, so he does own, if there is any overflow.
Walk through the property, they don't have to go to the road.
From a just point of view that, from an economic point of view, from an aesthetic point of view, to create parking that may or may not be used, it's.
Right.
So.
You don't have impervious you don't need, for sure.
Correct. So, I mean, we.
Got to make sure it's not, wind up with people parking on the road or something because of
I mean, we can show perhaps parking where that overflow parking may or may not occur on those occasions. I'm not so sure they're going to be impervious or
Yeah, if it's
even
gravel
gravel,
or
but
whatever.
that can be demonstrated perhaps if that's acceptable.
Could I ask our legal counsel if the use of a parking easement on the adjacent property would address the deficit or not in the existing property?
It could. I guess, I'm looking at the planner's notes that back in 2007, when the site plan was originally approved, there was also a variance that was granted.
Correct.
So, that's the other route.
Well, I think perhaps, Eric, in one of your comments, you're suggesting that we do need to go back before the zoning board? Is that a fair statement or not necessarily?
That's what I was told by the zoning department, is
Okay,
that
so-
without the building permit,
Yes.
that the area variance expired.
So we're assuming that we're going back to the zoning board for that request for less parking.
Let's face it, if you build it, Rabbi Bornstein is going to fill it.
They'll buy another building. So, there's a record on that approval, which is pretty easy to, I would think you just more or less copy the proceedings. It was granted previously, so there's a very strong likelihood that unless there's a demonstrable change in circumstances, the ZBA would, in essence, almost be bound by precedent to grant it again. And the ZBA is bound by precedent, so,
Right.
since there's a track record, I think that might be the easiest way to solve the issue.
But I don't think it's unreasonable to have our engineer look at the possibility of finding another place or two for an additional space or two or three. So I'm not saying no, you gave us the approval for 10 last time and that's all we're going to give you. That's not what we're saying. So we'll take a look at.
I don't know
Yeah.
what would be required.
Right. I'm also wondering, sometimes you probably will have events here, I don't know if they're weddings or those types of things, but people in that circumstance might not be as inclined to walk, they would likely drive at that location, and so it might be better for your facility to have, the availability, a little bit more available parking, was another way to think.
So according to the memo, it's one parking space for every 4 seats.
Yeah.
So,
that's,
So that would be 15, and I think that's where we got the relief from 15 to 12 last time, because there were 60 seats in the shoe, right?
right.
So 4, 60, 15, and that's where the
So the variance
five-space relief came from. So technically, we need 15. If we can find one or two more,
Seek, and ye shall find.
well, I mean,
I mean, the other, you could theoretically also bank them,
I'm sorry, Jeff?
Land bank, okay,
land bank them.
that's a good idea.
What do you want to say?
What I wanted to say is on a regular weekend, I mean, we get, 10, 15? If there is something, a special prayer after massacres or terrorist attack and they come, the tendency, I'm here 33 years, so in this building, I think I'm over close to 30. What happens is for a special event, they always come piled up with people. People commute together. They never walk in with 30. I never really had this. I'm here all the time. Sometimes if they really need to get in, they'll park actually past the Blue House. It's a property that is vacant where the restaurant was supposed to be built.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people use it. We don't have to use it, I'm saying, but in an emergency, they'll always,
Yeah, I mean, something will be built there eventually, so
Eventually, right.
that's not something to count on all the time. But you said you own the adjoining parcel to the north now, that?
yes,
that
the
other
Blue House, yes.
So there, I mean, there's already.
And there's actually a
there's already
walkway.
Big parking area behind that house already.
Yeah, and there's a pathway, which when we bought this property, so instead of going to the road to come to the Chabad, to the synagogue, there's one right, actually, middle of the park, to the side of, middle of the driveway, so they don't have to go to the road, they just walk in.
That's what I was gonna ask you, if there's a way, pathway through the trees there. Okay, great. Let's go, continue around for comments. Dr. Jones?
I'm good for now.
Yeah, I'm good. My only concern would be parking, but it sounds like there's a lot of options on the table to work it all out.
All right, Ben, anything further?
Nope.
Peter? That's it.
Parking, it's there. Find it.
It's available.
So if we do opt to go back to the zoning board for the relief of the parking,
I would think the best solution would be either to find additional, that would be the fallback position. I think if, Chris Lepine's looking at the site, if, obviously, the first preference would be, I think, if you can find land banking space on the site to make up the parking, that would be the most preferred. Second would be some sort of an easement, cross easement with the adjacent parcel, particularly because you have an access off the highway. I think that would be two, and then the third would be the variance.
okay, so you'd prefer not to, that's fine, that's fine. That was my question, whether we should be making application to the zoning board while we're going through this process here, but we'll take a look at,
Particularly because of the issues that were raised.
That's fine,
for
that's
Weddings or, other events where
That's
you may
fine.
have more parking requirements than typical.
Great events like weddings, other stuff, we always go out to Route 9, we rent a hotel like Ramada Inn. If something, expecting a big event, I won't do it there.
Okay.
That's the way it's been done for the last 30 years.
but we'll look at the
Well,
the parking
once you make it
alternatives.
bigger.
That's,
But real big events is not gonna be there.
Yep. I mean, I don't know what your plans are for the new parcel you acquired, but there is sufficient parking there, as you said, with a path through, so you can demonstrate that as well.
what we're looking to do is streamline the process. So, hopefully all the comments that we have are almost here so that the engineer can address those comments and we don't make a submission and then we have another series of comments. And if you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
Since nothing has changed really from the original approval.
Yeah, I think
12
the
years
gi-
ago.
I think that just as most people are concerned about
I guess
the
the-
parking issue, so.
The blue house, was that owned at the time of the prior approval or
No,
no?
No, it's
he
not.
just,
So-
2014, he
additional
bought it.
Now that gives you an option you didn't have.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Correct.
It's great to have options.
And I don't know if anybody had any additional comments on the architecture going forward, but that's what we approved last time. All right,
And we do need, and we will have a planning, public hearing. Lisa mentioned last time that,
Public hearings could be set by staff on a submittal.
That's
So if we
fine.
get a submittal responding to comments, then we can set a public hearing.
okay, I just wanted to double check to make sure that, again, we do in fact need another public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
public info.
Okay.
I move that the planning board defer action on this application pending establishment of a lead agency and direct the applicant to respond to comments of the planning board and those received from town departments and agencies, including but not limited to the following. Respond to the following said responses to reviewed by the planning department as to adequacy and completeness, 1 through 7.
I'd like to add 8. So look at that parking, the path through
Yes.
8 parking.
from the adjoining parcel.
Second.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just work with Chris to get a response in.
Yes.
By the time of the deadline.
Which is?
I was just looking that up.
August 26th,
August 26th,
by noon.
26th.
Monday.
No, not this Monday.
No,
A week from Monday.
Monday, August 26th, by noon.
Thank you.
Next up, Fairview Fire District Land Contour Major Permit Review and Erosion Sediment Control Review for the excavation of site material and placement of structural fill in the open field on the north side of the firehouse at 258 Violet Avenue, zoned IN Institutional District, 5.24 acres. It's an unlisted action. Fairview Fire District, the owner. Get a new one. Get a new one, yeah. That's the latest. All right, welcome and
Hi, I'm Michelle
describe the
Zerfus.
project.
I'm Michelle Zerfus with Berger Engineering.
Rich Campanola, architect with CT Mel Associates.
This is a pretty simple project. Basically, the fire department wants to, in the future, build a new fire station. We don't know when that is, and we'd be back for site plan for that. But at this point, with the tearing down of the psych center, there's the availability of structural fill. They grind up parts of the psych center into special grading, and that structural fill would be great for underneath the slab for fire trucks.
Super.
So what the fire department's asking for is just a contour grading permit so that they can dig out some of the existing soil to, footing grade, bring in the structural fill. Then they're gonna take and put top of the structural fill, they put in geofabric to protect the fill. Then they'll put the topsoil back on, they're gonna strip topsoil off, and then they'll put the topsoil back on. Seed it, so when they're done, it's still gonna look like it does now. And the whole proposed area of work is outside the DOT right-of-way, so we don't need any DOT permit or anything like that. And the other thing is that the proposed area of work is less than 1 acre of soil disturbance, which means we don't need to be covered under the speedies.
Don't need a
Or
SWIP.
under the SWIP, or under the NOI.
All right. Thanks. Kristen?
Yep, I'll give a quick overview before passing the baton to Don. And so this is before you for a land contour permit review, erosion sediment control review. It's on for an unlisted action for an uncoordinated review. I had originally had this on or listed as a deferment. However, after a discussion with Andy Learn, one of our town engineers, he actually said that he didn't have a problem with holding up the application and approving some outstanding items and working through some outstanding items through a conditional approval. So I am now recommending, and there was an addendum in your addendums packet this evening, to adopt a seeker resolution and adopt a resolution to grant conditional land contour permit approval. The specifics as they relate to the Speedies permit, as Michelle alluded to, the site is 5.24 acres. The area of proposed disturbance is 0.97 acres. And after a discussion with Andy, Mr. Learn, he is under the impression that the work that is proposed on the site will exceed 1 acre. So again, I'm going to defer to Don to talk through the specifics of that, but I did capture the language and my discussion in the seeker neg deck.
All right, thanks, Kristen.
Our concern, obviously, is that holding someone to 0.97 acres is rather difficult in the field. So we're suggesting, since it's close, it's that close, that there be a SWIP. I mean, it's not very onerous to prepare an erosion sediment control plan and file an NOI. So our suggestion is that we go ahead with that. It's to be on the safe side. Our only other comment was relative to the truck route, and I didn't know if the planning board would have any input on that, but we were suggesting that they try to use existing roads coming through New York State property as opposed to coming out onto town roads.
Versus coming down to Fulton Avenue or something.
Yeah. That was pretty much it.
It actually is quite a bit of work to prepare a SWIP. And anytime you disturb in your commercial site, you have to do runoff reduction, so I'd have to calculate water quality. Just to prepare the NOI application takes about 8 hours to get everything put in. So we'd have to have then a runoff reduction facility, which would expand the area disturbance. Now, some of the comments that I realize why they think we may go above is they said that the contractor staging area is in the parking lot, which is asphalt, so they won't be disturbing anything. So I think that some of what it is a tight site, but how it's gotten, they said, construction entrance stays the same. Basically, they're going to be working within the confined area. We can have a surveyor go out and stake it. It can be held to the stakes, have it all fenced in with either orange fence or erosion control fence, depending on whether it's upslope or downslope. But it will take, because it's a commercial site, it's not just erosion sediment control as soon as you disturb it. If it was a residential site, if it was a utility linear project, then you wouldn't need stormwater quality. But as soon as we try to submit an NOI, they're going to want water quality calculations. The DEC does not want an NOI submitted for anything less than an acre.
I see you're talking about phases. Is there ways where you just do part of it at a time, and then, so it's not, you don't have 1 acre exposed at all?
Actually, can I just show you what we proposed? Maybe it'd be easier if I point it out.
And if you want to grab the other microphone right there, yep, and you turn it on, and then it'll take like 3 seconds to warm up, so give it a minute.
Yeah, thanks.
So this is the existing fire station, this is the existing parking lot, and this is the proposed area of work. What they're going to do is they're going to start digging out and stockpiling, and they're going to stockpile it depending on where they have. They'll strip off topsoil. Then they'll bring in structural fill. Then once the structural fill is down, they put this fabric on top. Then they'll take the stockpile, put it back on top, and then start working on the other part. So the entire time they're working within this area, with the construction entrance stays the same, because it's just a matter of, it's going to be, moving dirt back and forth, but they'll move it from one side to the other. And the area below, that we're below the 1 acre is 1,300 square feet, so that's 10 by 130. So that gives still a fair amount of buffer room. You can say the staging area can be here. One of the comments was about concrete washout. They're about a mud mat. If for some reason they start filling, or they proof roll underneath and they don't put any stone back on top right away, they just pour some concrete to protect the subsoil that's been proof rolled. They can put a concrete washout dumpster right here. They make these now. It's a roll-off, special roll-off that you just wash out the concrete truck in. That can go right here. So there's not the concern about this expanding, because the contractor has other areas, and the fire department knows that there'll be other areas that they can just put the non-disturbance stuff.
And I'm assuming one of the comments that Andy brought up, though, too, was, if there was flexibility to reduce that in any way, even, to 0.95, and I'm not an expert. I'm sure these were all designed out exactly how they need to be.
Well, actually, the area might be a little bit less than 0.97. I just put down a little bit bigger. Even reducing it. But it's basically what they're thinking the footprint of the building will be, as far as their initial thoughts to be able to get enough fire trucks and all the other things that the fire department needs inside the building.
Yeah, I think we were commenting that if we got it down to 0.95, which you just mentioned, 1,300 square feet, 0.03, so you'd be losing maybe 1,000 square feet, 10 by 100. If you can get that down to that, we probably could waive this. We don't think that you'll be required to do water quality because you're not going with any impervious surface.
No, actually, you are.
You are?
The DEC, any soil disturbance requires water quality. Now, it'd be very small because it becomes impervious, but still, when you run the calculations, you still have to put in total area disturbance. Then you're impervious to zero, but it still comes out the other end with areas. I've done some sports fields, and they require that, and that wasn't anything more than taking trees out. So it's that. But if you'd like, we can get it down to 0.95.
Okay.
And then to that end, when you go to adopt the seeker neg deck, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if they read into the resolution just the seeker neg deck with no date specific, I can modify the draft that was provided to them, no problem?
The draft.
Because their resolution specifically states the date on this document. So I just want to confirm that if I have them read the resolution without stating the date on the resolution or the neg deck.
Yeah, I think what you can basically say is the board will authorize the neg deck to be amended as of such and such a date. If you put that, I think you do it as this date.
Yeah.
For both of them. And the process of actually making the amendment is ministerial.
That's staff level.
Yeah. Because it's going to, in essence, get drawn up in the minutes. So what the board action is being taken today, when it's typed up,
yes,
it's typed up.
Just wanted to confirm. Okay, great.
So just one question regarding, is there going to be compaction? And is there any kind of, is anybody from the town going to have to go out and look and do any kind of testing on this, or how's that going to work?
The geotech will be checking the compaction as it goes in. So at the time that they ever decide to build, they'll have all their geotech reports. Right. So it's going to be compacted under a geotech, which is what CT mail.
Because that was the thing I don't necessarily know for purposes of this permit if you're really contemplating any kind of structural analysis of it. It's really more of a grading and fill type of thing. It doesn't really, it's not really contemplating future construction activities, so.
Right, but it's in their
that was
interest,
my-
it's in their interest to document all of that, and so that we have it for the future if it's.
If I may, right now, what we're looking at, because of the availability of the material, whether they build the building or not, I, as the architect, would like to see that, of course, and so would the district. But just to make the land usable, if they want to use it for training purposes, just to put a piece of apparatus out there. If we do build a building in the future, we're going to be excavating down 4 feet for footings and everything else. So that material is going to come back up. We're then going to recompact and prep for footings and backfill. And that's, again, when geotechnical special inspections as required by the building code will take an effect.
Right, that's, okay. Just wanted to confirm that.
All right. So what were you saying, Kristen, for the motion to take the,
Just don't read the date.
just take the August, the unlisted action? All right, let's go around the board for any comments. Peter?
This looks like there's a very high water table. Have you done any test holes?
They have done deep tests and borings.
Deep
and,
tests, how deep?
I think. 50 feet. The borings are 50 feet. I think the deep tests were down to about 8 to 10 feet.
And what were the results?
Some areas it was just a couple of feet, other areas it was deeper.
It was a couple of feet.
And actually it was back. Over here.
What about on the site itself where you
It wasn't that bad. We don't anticipate hitting it within 6 feet.
when you say it wasn't that bad, what was it?
Like 6, 8 feet over there.
You hit water.
They hit modeling, yes.
On top of what I mentioned, we will be raising the site of the building as well. So we, even that, those areas which were in the back, which is where the grade comes off, we're going to be building that grade up to the road elevation.
And you feel comfortable with that?
Yes, with our geotech.
Thank you.
All right. Ben?
Whatever happened with the 2 acres that were dedicated at Hudson Heritage to the Fairview Fire Department? Are they going to make any use of that?
As far as I know, the district is still looking at that. They had no information on
Yeah, I
it.
don't think these guys are gonna be able
No, they're
to
not.
talk to the status of that negotiation probably, but that's still ongoing. We know that from talking to Fairview and to talking to Sabre as well. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, that seems like a
Yeah.
possibility too. And, you know, even the logistics, where it's located, I thought it'd be good. That's all, I'm just curious about. I didn't think you'd have the answer, but I wanted to bring it up.
One other thing, since you are getting the soil, the fill from the Hudson Heritage site, which is brownfields, and are you going to be testing the soil as you put it into service?
2 things. One, before anything is allowed on the site, to dump, we'll have to have their paperwork that shows that they've done the proper testing on their end. And then the second thing is we'll be doing the standard testing and sampling to ensure that what we get, that they didn't, switch paperwork en route.
All right, you're going to document that.
It's
Yes.
actually on the site, on the plans right now.
Okay, you're going to document that, and you'll share it with our engineer, copy him.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Nicole?
No, no comments. Thank you.
And Rocco?
And just curious, how high are you going to raise that contour-wise?
In the front, it'll raise about 2 feet. The site drops off towards the top of the page, so the front will be up about 2 feet. In the back, they'll be raising it about 6 feet from the existing ground.
Yeah, how much fill you think you're going to be putting in there?
4,500 yards.
All right.
How many truckloads do you anticipate, and what's the length of time that you expect the truck traffic?
The number of truckloads would depend on the size of the truck. So it would be, if they used the triaxles, it would be about 300 trucks. And the time frame, fortunately, it's going to be how it comes off the psych center that's going to be controlling, how much they're willing to give to us and other people. So it may be one of these things where there's a work for a while, and then it may stop for a while, and then work for a while.
Yeah.
So, like, do you think it'll be like several months? Is that how something like this goes?
I think
Okay.
it might be several months, just,
Because of, yeah, the nature of the excavation on the other end?
yes.
Gotcha.
Because
All
it's, if it was coming from Trap Rock or someplace, it would be continuous
more
trucks.
reliable.
This is going to be,
Yep.
however they decide, because even when the psych center's making material, they won't always be making the specific structural fill, they just maybe make it select fill or some other lesser fill.
So it doesn't sound like it's going to be like a constant flow of trucks. It'll just be sporadic and intermittent.
It'll be sporadic. I mean, one day they may get a whole bunch of trucks because that's what they're running on the psych center that day is the structural fill, or another day, then they may decide, okay, now we switch to something else because they hit another area of material.
Okay, thank you.
So that brings me to Don's comment too about the routing of the trucks. Is that something you've considered yet? Or?
Yeah, I've shown some routes, including the Fulton, which is not the best route, but I just showed all possible routes. I don't know exactly how you can restrict a truck driver, their routes. Some of the trucks may be our contractors, but some of the trucks may be contractors from the psych center.
Mm-hmm. Well, they have control over that too, and they own that piece of the road, so they can.
So, yeah, and also, if
Tell
you
them to go that
look,
way.
if they come out of the psych center, turning right would send them up away from Fulton.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think the trucks would be more likely to turn right.
Yep.
And if it's a bigger road, but I don't know how to control truck drivers.
All right. The other question I had was, there's a drainage pipe kind of in the back
Yeah, it's.
back corner
it's
there. What is
probably-
that draining from?
We think it might be a footing drain from the building.
Footing drain or a roof drain? Okay, I was wondering if it was.
Something
a
like
roof
that, and we
drain.
only found the outlet, and it goes under the parking lot, so we're not sure where it comes from.
Okay.
Just a follow-up question on the trucking. Do you expect that to be during the work week? Would it ever happen on the weekends, do you think?
If they're crushing on the weekends, it might happen on the weekends. I don't think, it's gonna be unlikely, but it could happen on Saturday. It cannot happen on Sunday because of the town code. Saturday, one of the comments I'll add to the plans, the town code hour is, I think, 10 to 4 or something on Saturday. It'll be whatever the town code is.
Okay.
All right.
Question?
There's got to be some form of an agreement between Fairview Fire and the Hudson Heritage folks in order to permit them to do the trucking here instead of having to cart it somewhere really far away, which is very expensive. Don't you think that there would be some way in that agreement to get them not to agree not to truck via Fulton?
The chief mentioned to me that he is in discussions with OMH in regards to this comment. He hasn't received a response yet, though.
We throw that in as a condition of taking a look at that.
Have we approved any screening or anything to be done by Hudson Heritage on their site? We're not just talking about digging fill out and sending it in a truck. We're talking about screening or something like that. So I'm just wondering if we haven't approved that yet, might be our opportunity to say to them, you can't use Fulton.
I have to see where they are with their demo permits. I know that, at least for the Cheney building, which is the biggest one, they don't have the permit yet, so maybe there's, I don't know.
I'm thinking you're gonna get this on the site plan, but do you think they're gonna take this, you think they're gonna crush buildings and give that to you?
Yes.
They can crush
Yeah.
the concrete.
Reclaimed concrete material is the intent.
Okay.
Not sifting fills necessarily, crushing up. All right.
Don, could you run that by us one more time?
What's that?
The screening. I mean, are we asking, in other words, we don't want debris for fill. We want something that's crushed.
Well, that's what it sounded like they were getting, was crushed material.
Yeah, we just want to be certain.
Yeah, they are. That's That's the plan that they've been described to us, that they would be processing that material there as they take as part of the demo. And then that material would be certified as appropriate.
Structural
You
fill.
you guys are the.
Clean structural
Yes,
fill.
clean structural fill, and that's what would be taken for the.
And we'll be certain that there's no asbestos or any other.
Well, that all has to get cleared out as part of the demo process. That's all being reviewed
Right.
by the building department currently, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're underway with the asbestos abatement already.
They
so-
are, yeah.
So that has to be all taken out first. All right,
Move that the planning board determine that the proposed Fairview Fire District land contour permit application would not have a significant adverse impact on the environment and that no environmental impact statement will be required for the reasons set forth in the seeker negative declaration for an unlisted action.
Second.
moved and seconded. Call to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the planning board grant conditional land contour permit approval, subject to the following. Respond to comments of the planning board and those received from town departments and agencies, and said response to be reviewed by the planning department as to adequacy and completeness inclusive of, but not limited to the following, 1 through 9 for trucks carting fill to avoid town roads.
Also, and the town should be copied on all reports from the applicant's engineer with regard to any contaminants in that soil. So any soil testing that's done, we want you to copy the engineer, our town engineer.
And 10 to be copied on soil
Testing.
testing.
And also, they're looking to
0.9.
adjust the
And
disturbance.
last thing,
0.95.
avoid a SWIP by adjusting to 0.95.
And to avoid a SWIFT to 0.95 instead of 97.
Second again.
It's moved and seconded. Call to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
All right. Good
Thank you
luck.
very much.
Seems like a win-win situation. They bill and you get what you need. Just got to make sure it gets there safely. Okay, Center Point is off the agenda. Next up is Salt Point Center, discussion of subdivision pre-application site plan and special use permit and aquatic resource permit review and the declaration of lead agency intent regarding a proposed 3-lot subdivision and development of two 3-story residential buildings of 48 units and a 5,000 square foot commercial building, gas station, and 4,500 square foot convenience store, and associated parking and landscaping subject to town board approval of a proposed rezoning amendment. 53 Salt Point Turnpike, Zone SPC, Salt Point Center. Welcome back.
Thank you. Bear with me again for a moment.
I'll also say this is a type 1 action, Kirchhoff Properties LLC and contract vendee, and Maturin Smith is the owner.
So again, Mr. Chairman and Board, Jeff Kane, representing Kirchhoff Properties, and this proposed development at Salt Point Town Center. The application for the Salt Point Town Center is in one of the 5 town centers that the town created when they last updated the town plan. And as required in a town center, it's a mixed-use plan with residential and commercial. The site itself is located at the intersection of Salt Point Turnpike and Ennis Avenue. If you're at the light Ennis Avenue looking straight, it's where that red structure is right across the street there. We control about 40% of the land in the Salt Point Center District. So it's the site is bounded by the IH and IL on either side, and the rest of the the Salt Point Center, really further down Salt Point Turnpike that we don't control. And the rail trail exists along the backside of the site. Again, here's an aerial, again, to provide a little more context, the old, again, Page's storage across the street from the site. The site is marked by a couple of things. One is it's a lot of floodplain, a lot of floodway. Again, here's the intersection, the signalized intersection at Salt Point and Ennis Avenue. Everything you see in gray is floodplain, and this line here is the floodway line. So all the development is really none of it's in the floodways, I want to say. So any of the development in the floodplain is really out of that floodway area. And the concept plan, as described by the chairman, described in the overview, as a mixed use project, 2 24-unit buildings, total of 48 residential units, a gas station, convenience store with a drive-through, and then gas pumps, and a commercial building. We've really targeted a medical use for this proposed use here, and we've reached out to a number of medical institutions to be able to gain a tenant on this site. You'll notice this kind of arced line here. There is a provision in the code related to the separation between gas stations in the town. So that line represents the setback to the gas station. So the actual gas facilities are separated further from the next gas station than is what's required by the code. So we've maintained in compliance. We have an area of soil excavation. So being in the floodplain, the requirements for, again, not all this is in the floodplain, but some of the buildings are in the floodplain. The requirement is that they have to be sited 2 feet above the base flood elevation. So our intent is to excavate from area in the floodway, build up the area in the floodplain. Clearly, the analysis will have to be provided to the engineer for review that we haven't created any downstream impacts, either increasing or decreasing flood storage, because either of those could have an impact downstream. So that engineer needs to be provided for review and confirmation by the town engineer.
How much fill how high up does it have to?
Oh, we have to be 2 feet.
But how much?
I don't remember the calculations of how much the dirt's being moved on the site. I'm not sure.
Right.
But we're not trucking down town road, though. We're gonna.
We'll continue.
We'll keep it on site here. We've have some conceptual architecture, again, looking to make sure that the site keeps away from, certainly on the commercial buildings, keep away from any kind of a flat roof look here. So this is the proposed convenience store associated with the gas. And then some of the conceptual architecture for the residential units. I'll mention that we actually developed this architecture for use at the Eastdale project. Went with a little different model, but many of the looks and materials here are very similar. This is a 3-story model, and the difference is these are walk-up units, so you can see an exterior breezeway connecting the units. So 24 units in each of these 2 buildings. But again, looking to create some of that more kind of classic architectural style for the area. And just again because the layout kind of helps determine what's going on in the exterior. So we've just provided a floor plans here for these 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units here that'll be proposed in the building. Again, zoning wise, subdivision proposed along with the site plan ultimately, and we've met all the zoning requirements for each of the lots. The lot 3 is the residential lot. Again, the minimum requirements and how we've exceeded each of those. There are a couple of things in that's associated with the project that are related to zoning amendments, which we've proposed in front of the town board. One of those is the Salt Point Center Zone currently limits the height to 35 feet or 2 stories. The other town center zones typically have a little taller height, so we're proposing that there's an amendment to 3 stories and 45 feet as a max on the zoning height. Again, it provides consistency, and we think it provides a better product here to go 3 stories. Otherwise, you end up with more units, same number of units, but spread out over more land. So I think going up here in this situation makes more sense for the site. And again, just to run through briefly the zoning amendments that have been proposed, and they're provided in a red line manner, but they are, we think, fairly minor in nature. Obviously, the biggest change here is that there would be drive-through allowed for the retail building. That's a prerequisite for our the proposed owner and operator of the convenience store, so there would be a drive-through behind the convenience mart. And then some clarification that motor vehicle service facility, which is a gas station, can operate with or without a drive-through. It's unclear in the code if we need to modify either it's a retail business or modify as motor vehicle service facility. Probably only one of those needs to be finally adopted, but we aren't sure which path the town board would consider with this amendment. So they're both in the draft we have presented. And again, modifying the area and bulk regulations to say that 35 feet or 2 stories to go 45 feet or 3 stories, consistent with the other town center zones. As the zoning was adopted, was originally adopted, there were some numbering seemed to have gotten lost kind of as it was adopted. So there's some cleanup language in here that you'll see, and that you'll see this addition of I in the proposed zoning. Again, that's just to provide more clarity to the zoning. And we did suggest one change on the discussing the ground level frontage of a single commercial use building, that to be treated architecturally to appear as if it's more than one building. We requested that minimum size that be applied to go from 4,000 to 7,500 square feet. Again, it's an architectural change that we could accomplish either way, but we think the 7,500 makes more sense for a town center. And then I guess really kind of lastly, there were some changes made to the Mid-Hudson Center zone, which in working with the town board, working with staff, and working with this board, we thought it made sense to increase both clarity and increase this board's ability to waive some of the specific requirements of zoning if the board found that doing so would improve the plan's consistency with what your plan for a town center would be. And so this section 9 here really gives the board the same kind of flexibility that you've been able to use at East Hill Village. And then the last change is the setbacks. Again, just a clarity that's consistent with the MHC zone, that setbacks really relate to structures, not developments. So if you have what is development versus not development, so we just again define that better as a structure. So that's again the summary of the proposal. What we've requested is that we've provided the application, the seeker EAF, together with a traffic study and an EAF and requested that the board begin the process by circulating for seeker lead agency. Again, it's the first step that the board would do on an application to start that process, and is typically what a board is asked to do on the first application. I think seeker says at the earliest opportunity to really start that process. So.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Eric? Comments?
Yeah, it does seem appropriate to proceed with a lead agency declaration. The application does include a proposal for a major subdivision of 3 lots, and the code does say that there should be a pre-application review by the planning board, discussion of the natural constraints and the natural features on the site. I think Jeff has discussed some of that tonight, but the language does suggest that the board discuss with the applicant and identify what additional information they might like to see on a subsequent subdivision plat prepared for next submittal.
All right.
So other than that, so the board may engage in that discussion and then proceed with a lead agency declaration.
Thanks, Eric. I think one of the biggest issues is going to be the floodway and all the earth moving and stuff. So I don't know if Don has any initial comments on that.
At this point, preliminarily, we're just suggesting they go to the DEC and ask for a jurisdictional determination so we know which permits the DEC is going to ask them to get. And certainly, like you mentioned, the floodway, floodplain, that's going to be the big issue here, I think.
Yep. And how much you feel you got to move, and how high, how much are you bringing that up from a height standpoint? Well, let's go around the board, hear from everybody else. Start with Peter this time.
Looking at the EAF Part 1, you've checked off a lot of boxes. And I'm sure as this progresses, a lot of the questions there will be answered. You might, I don't know if you'll have to amend the zoning question. Is a zoning change requested? You have marked no, you might want to change that to yes. For one thing, so you want to amend that. Under endangered species, you have Blanding's turtle, but in your appendix E, and Blanding's turtle is not cited. So just to fill in that blank. When the Fourth Ward Sewer District was created, like in any sewer district, they allocate benefit units. This site, when the Fourth Ward Sewer District was created, was just a farm. And it was I think it was a 210 designation, just a single-family residence. The town designated 3,000 benefit units, not thinking that at some future date there might be 48 apartments on that site. And I think we're going to have to look into whether or not that number of benefit units for that site will have to be amended.
It may. I guess the only thing I would add to that is when the town redid the town plan, there was a conscious effort to match any upzoning with downzoning in the town so that overall there was no net increase in benefit units or in residential units in the town. And so the density within the Salt Point Center zone may have had more density than just a farm. I think the seeker for that town plan contemplated
just to be on the safe side.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Sure.
Let's see, and that's it at this point.
That is.
Sure. Thank you.
It's another big project. Ben?
I know it's kind of early and everything, but this property backs up right to St. Peter's Cemetery?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the rail trails in the middle.
Yeah.
The rail, I mean,
There's
it's,
a rail
it's,
trail
the rail
between.
trail is in between, is right. It's the-
Okay.
Right.
All right.
The aerial here, right, so, right, the rail trail separates the two, and the cemetery is here.
All right, yep, I forgot about the rail trail, okay.
I actually have a comment or question before I forget. I know when this discussion had first happened, or maybe second, third happened a year or so ago, has there been any more contemplation with a connection to the rail trail? I've already said this, but I know that was
Yes,
something we talked about.
Right, and you can certainly see it on the plan there, there'd be a connection back to the rail trail through the site. So the rail trail is really off to the right of the plan there.
Okay.
And that's connected to the sidewalk that you're proposing along
Yes,
Salt Point Turnpike,
right,
correct?
and then it also connects to the sidewalk that we propose along the frontage of the site, yes.
Great.
So, yeah, again, it's, in working with, we've talked to members of the town board about the rezoning, and one of the things requested was, to again, add recreational amenities, add a connection to the rail trail, and we think those are real important, not only for, this particular site, but for the town in general in this, the more access to the rail trail, really, the better the thing will be. So we thought that was a great addition.
Yeah, there's a bit of topography on the north end there, so it serpentines up through, looks like, so. All right,
I guess one point to that connection, I would think that rail trail connection should be ADA compliant. There's some back and forth regarding trails, but to the extent you can grade it so that it's ADA compliant, I think that may eliminate some issues in the future.
I'm not sure we can. And that's, there are grading changes between here and then once we get actually to the, and it also, I just think we should show a connection. Clearly, it needs county approval to get the last few feet onto the site there. So there, we've proposed that, but they're really, not all sidewalks are ADA accessible, and we'll try to make this here, but I'm not certain we can. Detail.
Because there's, at that point, the rail trail's pretty high.
right, that's,
And it all
I
along,
was saying there's a bit of,
the back of the cemetery there and everything else, so. But I know on other projects where the trail was involved, there's some guidance out, because it's new construction. And that's something that should be looked at, and you can talk to the county about it. I don't know, but that's something I think you should
okay.
contemplate. I don't think there's necessarily a hard and fast, you have to do it, but if it's possible, I think it should be looked at.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, good point. It was, there's a bit of topography there, as you say, it's pretty high up,
Yes.
so. Not sure if it's feasible, but, if it can be done, that'll be, help even whoever's living there. Let's see, go to Joan.
I don't know if I was understanding you earlier. So your application currently contemplates 3 stories, and that would require a variance?
It could be accomplished with a variance. It could be accomplished with a zoning amendment. And we've recommended be part of the zoning amendment because we think the height is probably more appropriate for the Salt Point Center zone as a whole. If it's this board and the town board's druthers that you like the 3-story but don't think the zoning amendment is the way to go, send us to the ZBA, we would certainly make that approach as well. If he told us we want them 2-story, then again, we would change the architecture and show a 2-story building, but we think the higher building is right for the zone, and there's just a couple different ways to get there. Again, the variance or zoning amendment.
Yeah.
they both get to the same point.
Yeah, because if I was understanding Peter's line of thought, it does seem sort of a large structure for that area, but I guess that's balancing the whole purpose of the town center there. And I guess if you have to go to 2 stories, would it then change your physical layout to try to get more units in?
It would mean another building, yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
And I realize this is very hypothetical, but.
No, I mean, right, that's the, right, it's, those are the real, right, the real trade-offs, no question. That's the, but so if you wanted 2-story buildings, so really it's the same building footprint, but one more building is what you'd get for the same, because you, again, taking a story off each of these buildings, add
Yeah.
another one the same size.
And do you think you have room for that, given the issues with the soils around you, with the
Yeah,
floodplain?
we would end up with more land disturbance. So this, this green area here where we haven't proposed a disturbance, we would have to modify how this layout works. So certainly these buildings would be moved around differently, and we'd have a third building there. We think this works better, and certainly with the grade, we think kind of the hill behind it, the 3-story kind of just disappears into the hill. And I will say the other thing that we've done with the architecture, and it is 3-story, but you can see on these end buildings, because it has that dormer look, it's not, and you've got this long roof line here. It's intended to disguise some of its overall height and bulk. So it's yes, it's a 3-story building, but doesn't read as big of a 3-story building because of the architecture. That was at least the intent from the architect when we started to develop this. So.
Okay, thank you.
And that's kind of worked well out at the Eastdale Village apartments as well.
Just to follow up on Joan's comment, zoning text amendment is a planning and zoning landmine because it doesn't affect just your property. There are a dozen properties in the Sell Point zone. If I had my druthers, and it's obviously it's between you and the town board because they're the ones that make the ultimate decision. Right. If you went for a zoning variance instead of a zoning text amendment, it would be much easier for us to plan what's going to happen in those 11 other properties in that zone. Although, I will say, you control about 60%, since it's a small area.
40%, right. Right, so, yeah.
You control most of the land area in there, but there are 11 other properties within that zone that would be affected by a zoning text amendment because it paints with a broad brush. So I don't really know how that, what effect that's going to have in the future. So if you could go the variance route, it would make our life a lot simpler. But that's totally up to you and the
There
town
are
board.
other amendments that are proposed, though, that are important to your project that would not be likely candidates for a variance, right? So.
Right, we'd still need, one of the we do need some zoning text amendments. Again, we could use either of those tools for the height. One thing for your consideration on the variance versus a text amendment, and again, I'm not sure I really care about which of those tools that are used, but in the section that we're amending, the minimum lot area is 8 acres. And so that really kind of does, and again,
That's the only parcel in the Sell Point that has.
I'm not sure that because conceivably somebody could assemble and get the 8, but it does only apply to a larger group and potentially a larger project where you might want the extra height. And everybody says that you can also get with once you've granted a variance, then you've created a precedent, and so. Some ways you can end up in the same.
You've heard the expression "plan ahead."
Yeah, no, and I believe me, I try to live by that.
Okay.
But so you know, there's never the perfect answer for this one, and we'll work whichever way the boards think appropriate.
Just
so.
trying to keep us from walking on a landmine. That's
Yes,
all I'm doing here.
absolutely understood.
For purposes of the variance, use variances and area variances have very different standards. So to the extent that there's a request to make some changes to the permitted uses of the zone, that really should probably be done by zoning text amendment.
Absolutely.
I don't necessarily know if they'd be able to get over the hurdle for a use variance.
Yeah.
So, you know, so if they're going for a text amendment for the uses, then you can certainly look at the issues with respect to the area variance or the height of the buildings. As was discussed regarding the roof line, I don't know how, I'm not that familiar with half stories in your code, but certain zoning codes have a half story, which is in essence a sloped roof on the top story, where you have dormers and things of that sort. And so you while you may have the height, you may not necessarily, you don't have the flat roof for the third story.
I don't think we have that.
So,
Yeah.
but that's one of the other options to get you get the third story, it's not massed the same way as a 3-story building.
Okay. Well, it's going to be ultimately up to the town board whether they approve the zoning amendment. Which way you wind up going. All right. It's Rocco.
Okay, just, Jeff, just to get back to the rail trail connection a bit, since there's going to be, at that point, a pretty big difference in height between where you come in and the thing, how would that work? Would you also put in the rest of the connection, whether that be stairs or whatever, or are people going to have to scramble their way up there?
this last section?
Right.
We certainly need to talk with the county about how that happens. So I haven't really pursued that with the county, but we will. But the idea is that you would be able to get there at grade.
It wouldn't help much to just reach a certain point and then you see the prize, but you can't quite get there.
You're absolutely
type
right.
of thing. So, I mean, you're doing a good deed by doing that. I just want to make sure that we connect the rest of the way. Then with the rest of the green area, you're going to have any other recreational spaces there, like walking trails, or maybe, I don't know, be limited to seniors or anything? I mean, you're going to have kids, you're going to have any areas for playgrounds or anything else?
Right. We have an amenities area here that we've kind of identified as an area. We have not developed those facilities further. I'm certainly not opposed to other walking trails through the section. So yeah, absolutely, as we continue the development here, I think that makes good sense.
All right. Thank you.
Nicole.
Just like Eastdale Village, would you guys be doing sprinkler systems or?
I'm sorry, be doing
Sprinkler systems?
we haven't talked about it in detail. I certainly for the commercial, yes. For the residential buildings, I believe we will, but I'm not ready tonight to commit to it. But I don't see why we wouldn't do it. They've worked out well for us in the other buildings. So let me just to check with the architecture on that before I can give a definitive. But it's understood.
All right.
Yep. That's it.
My sense, I guess, as I mentioned before, one of my biggest concerns is the floodway, and you got to make sure you're not building. I was curious how much elevation you got to be bringing this thing up to get it out of it. There was a few years ago, when it flooded, I think it was one of the warehouses across the street was, under 6 feet of water, so it's definitely a flood-prone area.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, I think the fire department mentioned, it's a very accident-prone intersection. So with additional traffic here, that's something to try to consider as you're looking at the design of how it ties into the intersection. And it looks like you've aligned it there already. But traffic analysis will hopefully take a look at that.
And the proposal will be to rebuild that whole signal. We can't just, hang heads for the fourth leg of the signal. It really doesn't work. So this signal is proposed to be rebuilt and then add the turn lanes to get access into the site here. So,
Okay.
That's what we've discussed with DOT and the
All right.
project.
That should help. Okay.
I move that the planning board declare its intent to be the lead agency to coordinate the environmental review of the proposed project as a type 1 action and authorize the planning department circulation of a notice of said intent, a copy of the EIF, and a copy of the application to the identified involved agencies.
Second.
Moved and seconded for lead agency. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the planning board defer further action on this application pending establishment of lead agency and submittal of more complete plans, application, and seeker information as needed and subject to the following. Respond to comments of the planning board and those received from town departments and agencies. Said responses to be reviewed by the planning department as to adequacy and completeness included but not limited to the following 1 through 4.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Called to question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Continue to work through details on this one.
Yes, right. This is just an introduction.
Great.
Corridor, it's just such a flood.
Next up, waiting patiently here is the Stewart Shop at 2245 South Road for lead agency intent, seeker review, and special use permit review and site plan review for the construction of a new 3696 square foot Stewart Shop and a 2440 square foot self-service gasoline canopy and fueling area. Zone BH, highway business. It's an unlisted action, Stewart's Ice Cream Company owner.
Hello, Chad Fowler from Stewart Shops in Saratoga Springs. Here before you, we're proposing, as you just mentioned, a roughly 3,700 square foot Stewart store at the intersection of Southgate Drive and Route 9 South Road. It's the current location of Umberto's Restaurant and the Suds Car Wash. It's all one building there. The existing building's over 10,000 square feet. We are proposing 4 fuel dispensers here. 1 would have diesel, not all 4, just the 1. We try to control where we have our diesel customers, which dispenser. It's not, diesel's not a huge demand, and we try to control where we want the trucks to park, so we just show it on the 1. We are proposing 1 freestanding sign at the road, no signs on the canopy. There will be signs on each dispenser for pricing, and also 2 signs on the building that show the Stewart Shops. We will not meet setbacks, so we will need a zoning variance if this board deems a referral it will be required. We are proposing the entrances on the South Road. That's a right-in, right-out due to the curb island in the middle of Route 9. And the Southgate Drive, we can, right now the entrance is right at the intersection. We can move that about 70 feet, but we are limited to that 70 feet due to the grade of the road, Southgate Road, due to the property. So there is, the Southgate goes way up. So we can move the entrances some, but not as much as we'd like to. Green space will increase from 8% to 22%. We're proposing LED lighting. We haven't done a photometric plan. We haven't done grading plans. We really want to get the feel of the board in the town before we proceed any further.
All right. Let's go to Kristen.
Okay, thanks, Chad, for the overview. The project's on the agenda this evening for lead agency intent, circulation, seeker review, special use permit review, and site plan review. Per town code, this particular use is subject to both special use permit and site plan review by the planning board. Staff had a number of comments, a lot of them checklist related at this point. I think that we are looking for some additional information before we get into the next phase of review. And just looking for some additional documentation and clarification on your EAF. Nothing at this time that would prohibit it from being circulated for lead agency intent. It will go to New York Natural Heritage Program, and it'll be circulated to those similar agencies that are looking at cultural resources anyway. However, we do ask, this has been coming up in a couple of projects lately, that you provide some documentation for the site that it's across the street from an eligible property. Obviously, this property itself has already been built out, but just to make sure that the record is clear. And so staff is recommending the adoption of a seeker lead agency intent resolution and deferring action with comments until there is the establishment of the lead agency.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Probably nothing much on engineering yet.
We've got a lot of issues, but probably the only significant one at this point is that the impervious surface coverage is 78%, which is a little more than the 75 that's allowed. So there may need to be a few minor changes.
All right. Let's go around the board, starting with Joan this time.
I don't really have any specific comments except to say I think it's a nice use for this particular area and it seems well suited and I would think it would fit a demand there.
Great. Rocco?
Nothing really at this time. It looks like a nice plan. Let's see how it works out. Hopefully it works out.
Cool.
On Route 9 on that strip, we're trying to get a pedestrian walkway along Route 9. And it's possible that maybe we would ask you to do the same thing. Not necessarily that it'd be contingent on what you're doing, but just to possibly keep it in mind.
Sidewalks along Route 9.
Sidewalk, yeah. Also, I believe the fire department had a comment that they wanted you to add some information to your plans, maybe some, let's see, it was standard fire department notes to site plan.
I did see their note here, yeah.
Okay.
With compliance with their sections, yes.
All right, and something completely not having to do with that at all. You guys currently have vegan ice cream.
Yeah, only one flavor. It just came out 2 weeks ago. It's
I know,
only in
and it's
pints.
awesome. However, I think you guys could do a little bit better and maybe do like a mint chocolate chip or something like that.
Well,
I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there.
To date, it's been very popular, so
No, it is.
I'm sure
It's-
that's the
it's
next
just really
step.
sweet. It's
Yeah.
really sweet because you have the chocolate, you have the peanut butter, and then you have the coconut milk. So, I don't know, but anyway.
More to come, I'm sure.
Recipe
that's it.
feedback you got. Ben?
Well, right now, at this point, it looks good. I mean, Stewart's does a good job wherever they go, I think. So I'm confident that they'll do the right thing here.
Yeah, I know you have the experience with the gas tanks. And stuff.
Sorry?
I know you have the experience with the gas tank.
Yeah, gas tanks and
I'm
pumps.
sure they'll be having some
Yeah, we'll
comments
get
on
into
that.
But they know what they're doing. They know what they have to do.
All right. Peter?
Fiberglass, double wall, heater root.
Carl, before you jump in, if I might, there are just two other items. One, I just would like to put this out there now. If you're open to the idea of sidewalks, Chad, please start having that conversation with DOT sooner than later. There are quite a few changes to, their requirements that have trickled down through some other reviews going on that have caused some headaches. So I think they could be avoided at this particular phase in your review process if you have that discussion now.
Okay.
Especially with the curb cut on Southgate Drive, I think there's supposed to be a minimum requirement, or if it's within 100 feet of the DOT right-of-way, that's also going to trip other concerns. And secondly was that this particular parcel, it does fall within 500 feet of a residential parcel boundary. So there might be, I'll have to go back to the code, but there is some stipulation in our code about the proximity of gas tanks or fueling stations to the residential property boundary. So we'll have that discussion as we go through the review and, hopefully come up with a clear path.
Is that something a variance could be
That's what we've done in the
granted
past.
for? Okay.
Okay.
Oh, there's a big record on that.
Need to take a look at that. Yep. From a sidewalk standpoint, there's also, the deli across the street has a bus stop there and a sidewalk in front of it, so you're getting a crosswalk across South Creek Live.
Well, that's two different things. Sidewalk is probably a little more easy to agree to than the crosswalk.
Yep, so.
Crosswalks get very expensive and complicated with the controls, et cetera, depending on the intersection and what's available for wiring, et cetera. So that's a
It's
bigger,
just
that's a
something
bigger
to
hurdle.
keep in mind.
And that's why I think you should have that
Yeah.
DOT conversation.
DOT's already got to be
Noted.
involved with this project, so, with the curb cuts and whatnot, so it's got to be looked into. I do want to comment that, I do like the architecture that Stewart's has come up with versus the old style.
Yeah, it's
So
much better. We've been
it's
doing
looking
this
nice.
for, this version for about 5 years, and it really fits well between residential and commercial zones, et cetera. It fits nicely. We do have an Adirondack version of this, what we do build up north. It's more browns and different color stones, but it's the same version, so it's very compatible.
I didn't see on the plans where the free air pump it was, but I'm sure it's.
We will have air, and because it's Stewart's, it's free. Anybody that sells gasoline in New York State has to have compressed air. But we choose not to charge for it, so it will be here.
I've taken advantage myself, that's been good. Since it is close to residents, as we did talk, there's a huge resident population down there. You might want to consider a bike rack. We've had bike racks put in various places.
That's kind of been a standard for us too. We haven't added that amount of detail on here, but we will.
Okay.
That'll come out.
And I know you have the picnic tables and stuff and to gather. And you generally put the bollards around that and keep cars out of that area. I don't know if you've ever considered an electric car charger as well as an amenity, as another.
We've
as a
touched that a
go-to-
little bit,
go-to
yeah.
place.
We don't have a ton of parking.
It would have to be.
It's something we've talked to. We do have one Tesla charging station on the Taconic Parkway. It's kind of an experiment for us, and so far that's working well, but that's kind of a one-off.
That's in the Taconic, yeah, it doesn't
On
have
the
to, it doesn't have to be a
Taconic, yes.
Tesla.
I know it doesn't, but it's something we are in discussions with, just in general with Stewart's. We have over 300 stores, so.
They've been added someplace,
It's a
the
public
Golden
benefit.
Corral up the street has one now, and there's some of the hotels and other places in our town, so something to consider. Let's see, what else do I have? Guess that's it for now. I mean, I think the sidewalks are important because there's, just a lot of people walking in the medians of Route 9 right now.
I heard
where
you
there
with
is
the
no
earlier
sidewalks,
submittals,
so it's been an issue. And so we got it extended mostly all the way from IBM down to this, where this bus stop is, so. All right,
I move that the planning board declare its intent to be lead agency to coordinate the environmental review of the proposed project as an unlisted action, and authorize the planning department circulation of a notice of said intent dated August 15, 2019, a copy of the EAF, and a copy of the application to the identified involved agencies.
Second.
moved and seconded for lead agency, called to question, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the planning board defer further action on this application pending establishment of lead agency and direct the applicant to respond to comments of the planning board and those received from the town departments and agencies, including but not limited to the following 1 through 8.
Second.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. All right. Good to proceed.
Great, thank you very much.
See you next time. Last on the agenda, Marist College City Town Lot Line Revision, time extension for an approved lot line revision to add the town of Poughkeepsie's 3/8 interest in a portion of the 173 Kitcher's Place and other tax parcels. I move that the planning board grant a one-time time extension from Monday,
Ask a
August.
quick question before we do that. When we did this, I remember asking if there was certainty that the surveys and the deed descriptions for the properties in question were in order. You know, if they are, and is that the reason why there's a delay, or if they're not, is that the reason for the delay here? Is there any question in the survey or description?
I haven't seen, and they haven't submitted anything, so that's why
So we don't know.
no.
Thanks.
All right. I move that the planning board grant a one-time 60-day time extension from Monday, August 19th, 2019 to Friday, October 18th, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Any other business before the board?
I motion that we close for this evening.
8:30.
Moved and seconded, called to question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposition to ending the meeting?
Just made 8:30, Carl.
8:30.